Today's episode of Necronomipod is brought to you by Beardology. There are a lot of imitators out there, but there's only one place I buy my beard oil. Beardology beard oil nourishes your skin and won't leave you with that greasy feel. With over 17 cents available in their extensive product line, I trust my beard to Beardology. You can find Beardology at beardology.co. Use code NECRO15 to receive 15% off your purchase. Beardology. Discover the best way to avoid the shave.
Part 2 of our discussion on JonBenet Ramsey picks up from the 911 call we concluded with last week. We'll discuss the timeline of events that led to the discovery of her body, and arguably the most unprofessional police investigation ever conducted. We'll also discuss why so many people were allowed to enter and leave the home at free will, the odd behaviors and actions of JonBenet's parents that day, and why the house was not considered a crime scene until several hours after the body was found. We'll also take a deep dive into the autopsy report, which will probably leave us with more questions than answers. Just when you think the story couldn't get more bizarre, it takes 3 or 4 more crazy turns. I'm Mike.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Dave. If you thought part 1 of this train wreck was bad, stick around. We are going off the rails tonight. This is Necronomipod.
The investigators who first arrived at the crime scene the day after Christmas last year found no signs of forced entry. The body was found in the house 8.5 hours later by the father. The Boulder, Colorado police found themselves caught between a rock and a hard place. The Ramsey family has lots of political connections. The press corps was huge and ravenous. The safest course of action seemed to be just clamming up. The police said nothing, except that they were on top of it. Now, 5 months later, that appears to have been nothing more than posturing. As Tom Foreman reports, no one in Boulder these days appears ready to believe anymore that their police department is on top of this investigation.
Ransom note that was left at the Ramsey household. I got a little nervous because the first page looks exactly like my handwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was you.
Maybe I blacked out at 10 years old. Got to Colorado and committed a heinous crime.
Wouldn't be the strangest thing to happen in this story.
That's for sure.
I might be the only set of fingerprints that are not in this household after all the fucking people that showed up.
Right.
It's really creepy, though. That note, we posted it this past Friday as the teaser for this week's show. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Necronomipod. But the writing is interesting to look at on that note because it looks like it slowly and progressively like changes from the first page to the last page.
Yeah, they think some people think it was a left hand or someone was right-handed and did it with their left.
It looked like, and we actually, I had a conversation with some of the patrons today on the Discord that we have, patreon.com/Necronomipod. It almost looks like they start with their non-dominant hand and then halfway through switch to their dominant hand, but are still writing hastily.
Well, if you're trying to throw off a handwriting expert on the analysis,
Yeah.
maybe that makes sense.
Right. Or maybe they was taking too long. What did we talk about? The 35 minutes we talked about last week?
That's what the average if you were writing it with your left hand and you were right-handed.
So maybe they started with that. They got 20 minutes in and they're like, fuck this. I need to get out of here.
Yeah,
Possibly.
yeah.
Just throwing out a scenario.
Yeah, it's a strange letter. Lots of strange phrasings in there as well.
Yeah, I was trying to look back through some of the movie stuff. The stray dog thing is from Dirty Harry. He says something about if something happens with the dog, someone dies, whatever.
I mean, it's clearly not serious. It's a ruse letter, and it's preposterous.
We're just throwing out scenarios here. Or if you're a douchebag, scenario.
Does anybody say that like
People
that?
do.
I do sometimes.
No.
That's not okay.
No, it's terrible.
I'm going to say it today.
It's terrible. Throughout the whole episode, that's going to be your thing. All right. You know we're into a subject when our opening isn't even about something fun. It's just about the actual subject.
Yeah, there's nothing fun even going on tonight to talk about, really.
No, well, I mean, you can't have a whole lot of fun with this.
No.
With these
So
notes.
strange, though.
It really is. I think I'm learning that's kind of, I think, what I'm most into in all of these shows we cover are the ones that give you that leave you with more questions than answers, like the Dyatlov Pass and the Chris Benoit one, and now this episode.
So like those unexplainable scenarios where you can't really.
Exactly. Those unexplainable scenarios. It's like, that's as bad as saying instead of amateur, amateur.
I don't think so.
No, it's terrible. They're both
It's not
awful.
the same.
They're both awful. Or amateur, if you say it quickly, amateur. It's terrible.
I don't think people say that.
People do. I've heard it. I'm not just making this
Who
up.
are these people that say such a thing?
I'm not just making up these weird scenarios. So, all right. Well, we got a lot to jump into, so we might as well just get into it.
Yeah.
Ian, before we start, is this the most frustrated you've ever been putting an outline together? And I mean that in the sense of just the actual, the content, the meat of this.
It's really difficult to get a straight answer on anything because there's so many different experts that have put their 2 cents in this stuff, and then you start looking at shit that people post online, their theories, and it just gets so. It's not 90% of the online theories are absolute nonsense, you know.
And even when you try to formulate sort of an idea in the back of your head as to what happened, then like, what about this? But what about this? And nothing ever fits.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, nothing in this makes any sense.
Right.
And like we're going to talk about the pineapple issue at the end. I was sitting there last night reading about the pineapple forever, like all these.
The pizza, you mean?
I'm sitting there reading about it forever, and I'm like, we could do a full episode on the fucking pineapple issue in itself. So
that'll make more sense at the end of the show. I think.
Goddamn. We could do a whole episode on the pineapple pizza thing too.
Big controversy.
That fired more people up than anything else we've ever said on this show.
That's surprising.
And exposed that a lot of our listeners don't have much culinary taste, as far as I'm concerned.
No, because they like fucking fruit on their pizza.
It's an abomination.
But alas,
in the eyes of the Lord.
We've upset enough of them, so we're not going to go down that tangent. All right, fun's over. Serious time.
So where we left off with the ransom note being found. We kind of went over all that stuff in the last episode. Then we hit the 911 call.
And we listened to it a lot of times to see what people thought they heard there at the end.
Over and over again.
I didn't hear anything.
You did not hear anything the entire... I mean...
I hear sounds, nothing I can make out.
I thought I could hear for sure the mom saying, "Help me, Jesus." The other part, I don't know how much of it was just kind of my brain was led to believe I was hearing things because of what we discussed.
Well, because he told you beforehand what people thought they heard.
Nothing was very concrete. I mean, you can't get anything concrete from it.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know if I said it on the last episode or not, but I don't think anybody that says that they can hear 3 distinct voices on that is full of shit.
Yeah,
I agree for that. Yeah. Maybe 2, maybe. If you think you hear the dad in the background,
right,
John.
So yeah, let's jump into right after the 911 call. After the call, the Ramseys called Fleet and Priscilla White, and then they called John and Barbara Fernie. There's some debate on who was called first, but we know that the calls were made before 5:59 a.m. At 5:59 a.m., Boulder police officer Rick French arrives on the scene in a Boulder Police Department marked car. It's not disputed that Officer French was the first law enforcement officer to arrive at the Ramseys' house. Most reports have him arriving at 5:59 a.m. based around him arriving 7 minutes after the 911 call, which the 911 call was logged at 5:52 a.m. Some reports have French arriving earlier, but that would mean that the 911 call was logged at the wrong time.
So I guess my first thought is the ransom note said do not contact the police, so here they're rolling up in a marked car at 5 minutes later.
Yeah, that's
not great.
Yeah, first misstep.
Yeah, right off the bat.
Yeah,
because misstep in what sense? Like in following the ransom note, you mean?
Yeah, it says do not contact the police.
Right, I understand.
Well, and in all fairness, they hadn't read the whole note yet, but still.
And I feel like your first reaction is to call the police. Like in that situation.
But the police shouldn't roll up to the house that's probably being watched by the ransom note writer in a marked police car.
They don't know what the ransom note says, the police.
But I mean, most ransom notes say don't contact police.
Yeah.
That should be standard procedure.
Patsy said it right off the bat that there's a ransom note.
But then do you think that the police departments take the extra time then to wait, hold off that marked car and send an unmarked car in these situations? Is that typical?
I don't know. Would seem to make sense.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard to send a unmarked car, right? I mean,
I guess so. Probably not. You would hope not. Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
it's just not great. It's not smart right off the bat. Because right now in the story, right? Because right now in the story, we're still thinking that she's been kidnapped.
Yeah,
and
they're probably watching the house,
right?
You mean in this scenario, she's been kidnapped? I'm just gonna
it sounds better,
I'm gonna
right?
beat you to it, Dave, and just use it myself, and then
that was my goal all along. So,
at approximately 6 a.m., Officer French read the ransom letter and did a quick search of the house. Other reports claim French did the house search first and then read the ransom letter.
Isn't there a police report? How come what does other reports mean? There should be one report.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah.
French himself said that after being greeted by Patsy, when he got there, John Ramsey led him to the ransom note, and sometime after 6 a.m., Officer French searched the basement.
So a very thorough report. Sometime after 6 a.m., I searched the basement.
French checked the garage and lower levels of the house looking for places where a kidnapper might have carried off JonBenet, and he found none. The house was messy, but he saw no signs of a struggle. During the search, French failed to search what the Ramseys and later everyone else would refer to as the wine cellar room from police reports and French's search of the basement. So he did not go into every room down there, specifically the wine cellar room.
Doesn't seem to make much sense.
Well, go ahead.
Well, according to French and police reports, he saw this door during his initial search, and it was locked from the outside with a wooden latch. And he's called into question for it, but what he determines is that it would be physically impossible for someone to close that door behind them and secure the latch once in the room because it's on the opposite side of the door. So he's like, no one left through this.
Yeah, I get that part of it, but still.
It's probably not best protocol to just skip rooms. Yeah. But I understand in his haste. It's a mistake, but I understand it, I guess.
I mean, in hindsight, he could have just flipped the lock and popped the door open in 2 seconds, but
yeah.
While all of this is going on, Sergeant Reichenbach arrives and conducts a search of the home. At 6:03 a.m., friends Fleet and Priscilla White arrive at the Ramsey house. According to Fleet's later testimony, he alone searched the basement. Fleet White said that he went downstairs to look for JonBenet, and the lights were already on in the basement. Fleet White does not, at this point, if you believe his testimony, he does not know that there's a ransom note. According to him, he just thinks she's missing. And according to him, he had a scare before where he thought his daughter was missing and found her hiding somewhere in the house. So that was, according to his testimony, that's his first thing is he's going to start looking through the house.
Who called him? Do we know, John or Patsy?
From what I saw, it just said the Ramseys.
So when they call, what are they saying? Come over, JonBenet's missing?
I guess. Because according to his testimony, he did not know that there was a ransom note involved.
That's also, they arrived within 4 minutes.
They must have lived in the neighborhood.
That's really quick. Because you're probably being woken up by this call. To get up, get in a car, or run in 4 minutes?
I could be at your house in 4 minutes if you called me.
But if I'm waking you up and I'm saying someone's missing, get here. Yeah. That's really quick.
Yeah, I suppose. I'm just saying, if you frantically call me in the 6 a.m., I can be at your house in 4 minutes. But if I also said
the police are coming, I don't know. I guess that's just quick. That's really quick.
Yeah, it is quick.
Fleet White then searched the train room, or what he would call the playroom. He testified that the window in the basement playroom or train room was broken, and under the broken window was a suitcase along with a broken piece of glass. He does not remember whether the window was open or closed, just the fact that it was broken. Fleet White also opened the door to the wine cellar room but could not see anything because it was dark and there were no windows in that room. He also could not find the light switch because it was in an odd spot, and from his point of view, there was no sign of JonBenet, so he moved on.
Okay. So 2 people passed the wine cellar.
I mean, he opened it.
That seems plausible. Like, if you looking back, hindsight, the cop and Fleet should have probably been more thorough, but you're opening up a room, it's dark, you can't find the light switch, you probably do a quick once-over, your eyes aren't adjusted yet, so you think you see nothing, but really your eyes aren't adjusted, and then you move on. Again, it's a panic situation.
Yeah, I see your point.
I'm just saying it's plausible.
But if you're looking for a missing kid in the basement, I think you should probably clear every space.
I agree. But you're also, if you're Fleet and this has happened to you allegedly, maybe you're thinking you open that door, you're going to hear your daughter giggling or hiding or something. He might not necessarily be thinking he's looking for a body.
Yeah, I mean, in his mind right now, that's the last thing I would, he wouldn't even be thinking that she was dead or anything.
That's a good point.
At 6:10 a.m., Boulder Police Department officer Carl Veach responds to the scene, and Boulder Police Department has still failed to lock down this as a crime scene, allowing the Ramseys and their friends to just walk freely through the house.
This is just crazy.
So, I mean, they all should have been segregated into one spot and told not to move, I would assume. Would be
Probably
standard
even
procedure.
outside the home, even, like just nobody in the house.
Well, just cordoned off, at least.
At the very least, yes.
Yeah, they should have all been like, okay, you're going to stay in the kitchen or something, and we need to figure this out. Because regardless, we don't know it's a murder, but regardless, if she's kidnapped, she was taken somewhere, so there's going to be some forensics somewhere in that house.
Sure. Yeah. And now you got people opening and closing doors, touching doorknobs, probably opening and closing windows,
right?
Putting footprints all through the house. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. John Ramsey told the police that after he was aware that something was wrong, that he did check the first floor doors and found them all to be locked. He says the Ramseys, like we talked about in part 1, had an alarm system, but it was turned off. They also had a dog, but it was staying at a friend's house that night, so it was not there during the incident. Some people bring that into question, but they were planning to go out of town the next day. They were getting that flight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The dog's gone. There's nothing, I don't see anything odd with that.
Not at all.
John said he saw no signs of forced entry, and both John and Patsy say they heard nothing throughout the night. Police officers see marks on the kitchen door that led to the outside, which they questioned, but John Ramsey didn't know if they were old or new because he had a habit of forgetting his keys and just breaking stuff to get into his own house and not fixing it. Like he would just bust a window and...
It's weird.
It's a very strange habit.
You get one of those fake rock key holders you can put in the garden or something, dude.
Yeah, come on, pal.
Or just busting, breaking the lock on the back of your kitchen, door.
Was that proven that he does that, or is that just something he said afterwards, after the fact?
As far as I could see, that was a verifiable habit of his because there was stuff broken all over the house that he would just bust shit to get it back in his house and stuff.
4 broken windows in the back. Oh, yeah, that was me. Just trying to get in.
We'll get later to a basement window that he's like, yeah, I broke that. I just forgot to fix it. It's a very strange thing.
I feel so vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange habit to get into. At 6:45 a.m., John Ramsey called their pilot, Michael Archuleta, and left a voice message for him. A few minutes later, the pilot called back, and according to him, all that was said was something was wrong and the Ramseys would not be making the flight. At 6:45 a.m., Officer Sue Barklow arrived at the Ramseys' house, and about the same time, a victims advocates group, who was called in by the police, arrived at the Ramsey house. The police have still not locked down the house as a crime scene, and they have now called more people into this house. And the victims advocates group brought bagels and coffee for everyone.
Have you ever heard of such a thing like this?
No.
I can see a post-crime later on advocates group, but they show up to an active crime scene?
Right.
I've never heard of such a thing.
No, that's really odd. Don't get me wrong. I like the idea of it is okay.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah,
to an active, maybe take the family to a location where they're going to be supported and have
not just invite in a bunch of strangers into an active crime
right.
scene.
Yeah. Is this how CEOs and rich people get treated by the police when they come over?
I do think some.
I don't know.
Some of this I do think is different treatment based on their income and their status in life.
I think there's going to be a lot of that as we get through this story.
I don't disagree with that.
At 6:50 a.m., Officer Weiss and Officer Barklow were photographing and fingerprinting areas of the house. Officer Veach had collected the ransom note, and at 7 a.m., Burke Ramsey was woken up and dressed. There are 2 different accounts of how this went down, but both are pretty similar. One account states that John Ramsey, Fleet White, and John Fernie woke up Burke and got him dressed. The other story says it was just John Ramsey and Fleet White.
What's the significance of that?
It's just the different stories involved here. There might not be any significance in it. It's just reported 2 different ways.
Every step of the way.
Yeah.
Every aspect. If one of your kids was kidnapped, wouldn't you want the other one right next to you? I mean, at all times during
I was
this
thinking the same
unfolding
thing.
scenario?
Yeah, I thought that was very odd.
And I find
we did say in part 1 that they went and checked on Burke, didn't they? They went up and
Yes.
saw that he was in the room, and then they went and allegedly confirmed. We didn't know if Patsy saw she was missing first and then went downstairs, or then ran back upstairs and saw she was missing.
right.
But we did say she did go check on Burke.
Yes, Burke was checked on according to them.
Like, I don't think you would leave that kid's side, right?
I agree.
You wouldn't let him out of your sight.
No, because this all went down. They found a note at 5:45 a.m. Now we're at 7, and they're just waking him up. I also find it hard to believe that this kid was still sleeping with all these police officers and people in the house.
So if it's a big enough house, though, he might not even know what's going on.
It's a big fucking house.
It's a mansion. You might just not know.
Maybe
He had a TV on in the room or something. I guess we might have heard of that, or we might just not have known.
I mean, I guess you could make the argument that he couldn't have heard it because the house is so big, and they weren't maybe not by his room at the time.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, but just to leave him up there by himself for over an hour.
I agree with that.
This.
Like you'd want to just keep an eye on him, because why would you not suspect they're gonna quote, come take your other kid,
right?
And you have no idea what's going on at this point.
You don't know, so
they could still be in the house,
That's
right?
Very scary.
Like,
yeah.
who knows?
Plus, there's fucking broken windows all over the house because John doesn't know how to get in. So, yeah.
At 7:13 a.m., Reverend Roland Hoverstock from St. John's Episcopal Church arrives at the Ramseys' home. So we got another outside person just rolling in here.
I'm assuming the family called him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I don't understand why they are calling all these people over. It doesn't make sense. Or why the police aren't like, hey, you know what? Stop. Don't call anybody else into this house.
Yeah.
Or rich people treatment.
After the Reverend arrives, Burke Ramsey was taken by Fleet White and John Fernie to pick up the Fernie children, presumably at the Fernie home, and then taken to the White's home. So the other really strange thing, in my opinion, is why, if you think one of your children has been kidnapped, why are you letting him leave? Or why is the police letting him leave the house?
Exactly. None of this makes sense. He's by your side nonstop. That's it.
Yeah.
Is that special treatment by the police, or is that just incompetence by the people investigating? They're just they don't have a control over the situation right now.
It doesn't seem like they have any control over it.
And that's what I'm leaning towards too. Like, I don't necessarily think I rate that as special treatment. I think it's that they're just flustered and...
Well, but incompetence leads to losing control of the situation.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Another interesting fact, when I was reading something, and it said that the one person who had been trained in like hostage situations in the police department was on vacation that day.
Yeah, 'cause it's Christmas.
Yeah, so that's it. One person was trained.
Well, did they have a lot of hostage situations in Boulder, Colorado at that point? You would think you'd have more than one.
No, but you need a backup because possible to happen.
Do you not have someone like another town or city to call in? It's like,
something.
Hey, we're going to go ahead and need you today.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody should have at least somebody on call for that situation.
Yeah, right.
You would assume.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a small town that's you would think can't afford something like that,
I don't know if you guys know this. I'm the backup hostage negotiator for our city.
Oh, are you?
Yeah. Luckily, they haven't needed me, but if they did. Come out here right now or shoot your ass.
Is that
Matt, with your hands up, boy.
I don't play, bitch.
That's you de-escalating the situation.
Yeah, well, I'm keeping everyone calm.
You motherfucker.
But I'm keeping it very, I'm straight ahead about it. I'm gonna be very honest with you and be, come out of the house. We're gonna shoot your ass. That's how I play that game.
You got 5 seconds before we blow up the trailer with you and all the hostages in it.
Bitch.
So while Burke is being woken up and dressed, police want to ask him if he heard anything. According to most accounts, John Ramsey told the officers that Burke was sleeping the entire night and he saw and heard nothing.
So John kind of stepped in and wouldn't let Burke talk.
Yeah, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
I don't either, but that doesn't help the cause of a cover-up situation.
I guess if they're like, hey, did you hear anything?
Like, I feel like I wouldn't protect a kid from answering that question.
I'm trying to think about this scenario.
I feel I would be asking the same thing. Did you hear anything? Anything you can give us? If I was the parent.
I guess if you knew he was sleeping the whole time, are you just trying to help the investigation, telling the police he doesn't, he didn't hear anything, he was asleep the whole time?
But he might have been sleeping, but maybe he said, "Oh, I did wake up. I thought I heard something fall."
Yeah.
But then I just rolled over and went back to sleep. I would want to know if the kid heard anything.
I guess you would be speaking to him in conjunction with the police, not trying to block the police, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would not fault him for protecting his kid.
Right.
But it also doesn't help the case for a possible cover-up.
I mean, I could see him immediately knowing the legal situation of this. He is a CEO of a weapons defense software company. Mm-hmm. And you would have to know immediately that you're going to be a suspect in something. So he's like, no, even if he has nothing to do with it, I could see that.
Yeah.
Being like, no, you're not talking to anybody right now.
I don't disagree.
Which I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I don't either. I guess you're trying to weigh,
But at the same time, how much are you thinking that over the fact that your daughter is missing? And I don't know. I'm not in that situation.
It's hard to put yourself. I mean, you think you know how you're going to react in a situation like that, but you probably don't.
I guess my thought is if I'm innocent, I'm not even thinking about what I'm going to have to go through legally. I'm thinking about how the fuck do I get my kid back? And I'll do whatever it takes, and I'll cooperate with whoever to help make the situation as smooth as possible.
That's the problem, though. When you're dealing with incompetent cops like that, you saying the wrong thing could get you.
I understand.
In a lot of trouble down. So I mean, it's not.
I just don't think that would be where my mind is, and it's hard to say because you don't know. I just don't think I would be thinking about what the repercussions of I'm going to be, because in my mind, I'd be like, well, I'm completely innocent. I just need to find my kid.
And I mean, there's a whole series on Netflix about people that describe exactly what you're saying, and the cops twisted on them, and they're in jail for something they didn't do.
Again, I'm not faulting him. I'm not in that situation. No. I'd protect my kid as much as I could too, and maybe that's what he was doing.
Yep.
I mean, the police are a requirement in society, but they also fuck up just like everybody else does, and sometimes they push to get their narrative to fit. And close a case.
I think our 3-part series here is a case study in that, very much so.
At an unknown time, John Ramsey apparently searched the basement and did this alone. According to some stories, he testified that he found the broken window partially open, and under the broken window, he also saw the same suitcase that was seen earlier by Fleet White. John Ramsey testified that the suitcase belonged to his family but was normally stored in a different place. John Ramsey then returned upstairs.
So he didn't go to the wine cellar either.
At this point, we're at 7:30 a.m., and the police have done the first smart thing you would do in a ransom situation. They stopped all radio communication and switched to cell phones, and they also put a trap and trace on the Ramsey's phone lines in case the kidnapper called.
After all these squad cars have pulled up and sirens blaring.
An hour and a half later.
Victims advocate groups coming in.
The bagel seeds all over the place.
Probably spilling coffee everywhere and shit.
Right.
But we don't want to draw attention, so radio's off.
They're probably out front with bullhorns.
It's actually not funny. It's really sad, but you got to put that out of your mind.
Yeah. Around this time, they also collect the $118,000 ransom. And like we said in part 1, John Ramsey basically pulled this out of his pocket.
This was his holiday bonus, wasn't it? Wasn't it 118? And
it was basically rounded up to the cents.
Did he have cash in the safe?
As far as I know, it just says that he got the money, that the money was put together.
I mean, it's having $100,000 in $100 bills on hand and, presumably in your safe at home. I don't know. Is that ordinary?
I'm not a rich person. I don't know. I would like to say yes, of course. It's very ordinary. We do it all the time. That does seem odd. It would seem odd.
Seems
to
like
have
a lot.
That amount. Yeah.
Or if you're a defense contractor industry, is it possible that you might have to leave the country quickly? I don't know.
You never know. You have that, for safety or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, and there's nothing that I could find anywhere that said like what specifically bills it was, or you know what I mean?
Because the ransom note said 100,000 in hundreds and 18,000 in 20s, I believe.
That's a lot of $20 bills.
Sure is.
Not for someone like me.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm an associate hostage negotiator for
Oh yeah.
For the township.
Medina County. So, yeah. Raking in all kinds of dough. I'm a volunteer hostage negotiator. I'm like Dwight Schrute over here. I just volunteer for that position. They don't call. They don't call me. What is he? A volunteer sheriff's deputy?
Yeah. And then the firefighter thing too, I believe.
That's when he's looking up everyone's medical records. There are a ton of yeast infections. Any hoodles.
At 7:33 a.m., a canine unit is put on standby. And this is weird because they never use the canine unit. They just have it there on standby. You would think if you had the resources to allow you to have a canine unit, you would bring in at least one dog and let it sniff around.
To pick up her scent.
Right, and see where the point of exit was.
And they did not.
If they would have brought, because we know what happens. She is found dead later on. If they would have let that dog sniff something in her bedroom, it would have led them right to that wine cellar door. And we wouldn't even have to talk about any of this other part, any of this other timeline stuff.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense because you're looking for like an exit from the home. Because again, they're not thinking the body's in the house or she's in the house. They're thinking she's gone.
Yeah, this is a kidnapping right now.
But like you said, use the dog and find out what exit they went out of, whether it be that basement window or the front door or whatever.
Of course.
If
Or if
you
it's
have
the
it there-
neighbor, if she could be next door.
Right.
Yeah.
You have the dog there.
Why would you
it's
not
there.
use it? Why would you not use any resource you could?
Right. The dog is at around that crime scene,
So
just sitting on standby.
did they give a reason as to why they didn't? Or they just didn't feel it was necessary?
I mean, I couldn't find any explanation.
Because we're not talking about like preferential treatment, I guess, at this point, right? Like, why would you just not use a resource that you had?
It's just incompetence.
Seems to be incompetence.
At 8 a.m., neighbor Scott Gibbons got up and saw the basement door to the Ramseys was wide open. There's some debate on whether this door being open is relevant or not because a police officer or even John Ramsey could have left the door open when going through the basement.
I feel like at this point, you're 2 hours later. People have been coming and going.
Right.
Is Scott Gibson also the one who saw the light on at midnight in the kitchen? Or was that someone else from our first?
He is not. I'm pretty confident in that.
Perhaps someone in the kitchen eating some pineapple at midnight. We're teasing this pineapple up, and then we're going to get there and people are like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, he is not.
He's not the same neighbor.
No. At 8:10 a.m., Detective Patterson and Detective Linda Arndt arrived at the Ramsey home. Officer Rick French gave them an updated briefing. Detective Arndt prepped John Ramsey regarding the ransom call on how he should handle the call when it comes in. First, to keep talking or keep the caller talking long enough to trace the call, and maybe get the most important thing is to demand to talk to JonBenet, make sure she's alive.
Proof of life, if you will, in the industry term.
Right.
Yes, I know. I'm a hostage negotiator.
While this is going on, the victim advocates group starts cleaning the kitchen, which is just completely outrageous that they weren't stopped. That someone's like, you can't start wiping down counters. Like, what are you doing?
That just defies any sense of logic.
Yeah.
You would
at
think
all.
also if you're a victim advocates group, you're probably being allegedly called into a lot of these situations. You would know better, right?
You
Than
would
to
think.
start wiping down crime scenes. I mean, I guess it's not a crime scene technically at this point.
But still.
You would, yeah.
But it is a crime scene. Maybe they didn't make the official
They haven't-
declaration,
Sure.
but there's
No,
a
I
missing
understand.
6-year-old.
Yeah.
Has anyone from this advocates group ever been interviewed, like, later on, maybe, and then asked, like, what the fuck are you doing?
That's interesting.
That's your next
I wonder,
interview.
I wonder what, yeah. How did no one ever talk to them? Did they ever release a statement? Like, they were very close to this.
And what kind of bagels did they bring?
No one.
Because I like an everything bagel myself. The little salmon cream cheese, smoked salmon cream cheese.
I'll do that.
I've never had that before.
That's the best.
I like the veggie
All right.
cream cheese.
Also delicious. I just think it's odd that if they were this close to the investigation, they're seeing it with their own eyes. They were never brought in for questioning or to testify, or nobody looked to this group to say, hey, did you see anything on that day? That's weird.
And this is not the Stone Ages either of criminal investigation. This is 1996. This is a couple years after O.J. Simpson's trial was over. They used DNA in O.J.'s trial. It was the first mainstream trial with DNA, but the science is still out there. Evidence collecting is not like
Right.
primitive like
Yeah.
the 70s
Right.
at this point.
Like many of the cases we've discussed.
Right. So this is just completely unreal that that this would not be stopped.
Well, but even fingerprinting's been around for 100 years. You still don't let people wipe down a crime scene.
Well, Dave, they had to get the cream cheese off the counter.
And that's the thing. Is this rich people treatment? Is this like this is an extremely wealthy man?
Mm-hmm.
But when you say rich people treatment, what do you mean in this sense?
Like, does he know the mayor or the police intimidated, tiptoeing around, what they can and can't do as they're dealing with him?
Right.
That sort of thing.
So not necessarily protecting him because he was involved in something.
No.
Just trying to be very careful not to upset him.
Protecting themselves.
Right.
I still don't understand how wiping down counters, though, would upset him. Like, that's a point where you can step in as a police officer and say, hey, don't do that.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is all on the fault of the police.
Right.
Completely.
That's partial incompetence. I mean, there's
there's a lot of incompetence,
going on
and there's
here.
a few things where you can say maybe some treatment.
Yeah.
Like wiping down counters. If I'm a cop, I don't care who you are. I'm going to tell that person, hey, stop wiping down that counter.
Right. I'm talking the victim advocates group. Like maybe they did spill some shit, and they're like, oh, I don't want to piss off anybody, so I'm going to wipe that up.
Like
but
maybe the victim advocate group. Say that again.
The victim's advocate, like maybe someone from a member of that group spilled something, and they were like, "Oh, I don't want to piss anybody off."
Physically spilled something, or like spilled something knowledge-wise?
No, like phically knocked a coffee.
I'm thinking you mean knowledge-wise, like spilled something like, "Hey, I just saw so and so cleaning up a bloody rag."
Oh no.
And the cops are like, "Well, we're you're nobody, so we're gonna wipe."
No.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Like they knocked
the
the coffee over or something.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
But then that's on the fault of the police. They need to say, "Hey, stop!"
You
what
should
you're
have
fucking
somebody
doing.
there watching them. Like, you should have a cop in every fucking room of this house, just kind of monitor, especially if you're having all these people in there.
Well, everyone should be in one room.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. First of all, they shouldn't be all over. If you're going to allow them all over, you should probably have cops monitoring everything.
Yeah. At 8:36 a.m., John Andrew and Melinda Ramsey boarded a Delta flight in Minneapolis to head back to the Ramsey home.
So those are his adult kids from his first marriage.
Right.
We talked about the house diagram. Those two also had rooms assigned in the second floor of the house.
When they came to visit?
It had their rooms listed, so they must have had permanent rooms in the house.
Okay.
On that second floor. So the JonBenet and Burke were at the ends, and then those two were in the middle-ish?
Something like that, yeah.
At 9:27 a.m., detectives contacted Gary Merriman for a list of employees at Access Graphics. So they're starting to get the ball rolling as far as potential suspects.
Maybe pageant judges as well should be on the list of people they're getting names from.
Whoever those guys are with that ordering that magazine.
Right.
At 10 a.m., no one, including the Ramseys, mentions that the suspected kidnappers failed to call during the time they said, which was 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. This is probably the most mind-boggling aspect of this case so far that we've covered, because as a parent, you would be sitting by that phone, waiting,
staring at it.
John Ramsey was prepped specifically on how to handle this phone call, and it comes and goes, and no one says a word. The police don't say anything. The Ramseys don't say anything.
And he's not even sitting by the phone. He's doing his own thing, searching the house or whatever he might be doing.
And with the implication being he knows no call's coming, right?
That would be the suspicion here.
I would be sitting by the phone, I think. Again, I don't know what I would do in that situation.
Yeah.
But you would imagine if that was your only hold on hope, is that you got your money and you're waiting for that call, plus your thought is they're going to trace it, or maybe I'll get to hear my daughter. Yeah, I'd be sitting there waiting for that call.
My thought, and I feel like I don't even need to put myself or be like, I don't know what I would do in this situation. If I was prepped for a phone call specifically by the police and how to talk to a kidnapper between this window of time, my mind would be thinking on nothing but how I'm going to handle talking to this person.
Yeah.
And when that didn't happen, I'd be like, hey,
what do we do now?
What do we do?
Yeah.
Because the phone call didn't come. And everyone just went about what they were doing like nothing even happened.
Or are we just so accustomed to movie scene ransoms that you just think that that's how it would play out?
But wouldn't you say something? If
You
you're John
would think,
if you were John Ramsey, wouldn't you be like, "Hey, the phone call never came"?
Everyone in the house should be focused on that moment that phone rings.
Right.
Because that's the only lead at that point. No one's thinking she's in the house somewhere.
Thing you have to hold on to is that call. I agree.
And my biggest
if only there was a hostage negotiator that was available on this one day when they needed someone to kind of take charge and tell people what to do.
It just sounds like no one's in charge. No one knows what to do.
Yeah.
It
just makes absolutely zero sense. Why?
Right. Do we think, how prepared were the police for this kind of situation? And I know we don't necessarily have the answer for that, but in Boulder, Colorado, how often are they dealing with a situation like this? Maybe they were also ill prepared, just they didn't know what to do. So they're kind of running around investigating, but not really knowing what to investigate.
I think that plays somewhat of a part in it, but they're missing really basic police tactics.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just also, for a situation like this where there might be a hostage, maybe they weren't even prepared for that to know, what they should be doing, like the unmarked police car coming or something like that.
I'm sure they weren't prepared at all, but I mean, we're talking, 4 hours later? I mean, they could have been on the phone to the FBI and asking for guidance at this point.
And that's something that will get brought up in part 3 with who John Ramsey works for and why this wasn't locked down, a lot stricter right off the bat.
There's a lot going on here.
At approximately 10:30 a.m., Detective Linda Art and Fred Patterson finally seal off JonBenet's bedroom.
So, now they do.
So we've done it. At 10:30, they sealed off her bedroom.
How many people have been walking in and out of there?
A portion of the house. Yeah. Not even the whole house. We're going to seal off just this room.
No, the whole house is still a free-for-all, but her room has been sealed off.
I guess it's a start.
Yeah, we're getting there.
That was where she was last seen, so makes sense.
Shortly after 10:30 a.m., all police officers besides Linda Arndt and the victim advocates leave the Ramsey house. So that means we now have Detective Linda Arndt at the home. One detective, one single person responsible for Patsy Ramsey, John Ramsey, the Whites, the Fernies, and the Reverend.
Why did this happen?
That's so weird.
No idea. They just left. Everybody left except for her.
To go do more work? Like for this, or just to go back patrolling the streets?
I don't know.
That's so weird.
But they're detectives. They weren't,
they
weren't all street cops.
Right.
I guess so, yeah.
I feel like, we'll see in a little bit here, Linda Arndt does some really questionable things, but this is completely throwing her under the bus. Saying, oh yeah, you know what?
You got this. We'll let you go.
Kidnappers were supposed to call 30 minutes ago. They could be running behind. We don't know. But guess what? You're going to stay here and you're going to be responsible for 7 people in a crime scene. See ya.
Not even a crime scene.
Well, yeah.
Technically.
It's unimaginable, yeah.
There's nothing you can even say about it, really. It's just nonsense.
I keep saying it defies logic, but
it's hard.
Logic.
You can only say it so many times in one damn episode.
It's hard to believe it even happened.
Yeah.
Between 10:40 a.m. and 12 p.m., John Ramsey is unaccounted for. Linda Arndt, the only officer on the scene, does not know where John Ramsey is during this time frame. She knows where everybody else is, but she does not know where John Ramsey is. He disappears during this time frame.
Just keeps getting stranger.
Yep. When she finally accounts for him around noon, she says that John was sitting by himself reading some type of letter or something. She makes the assumption that he left to go get the mail.
For an hour and 20 minutes.
Well, that's what I'd be worried about, getting the mail.
Right. Well, that's what people call into question with that. When she said that back when this was all being first reported on, everyone's like, what the fuck? Why are you checking your mail?
Well, you want to see if you got some good credit card 0% offers in the mail that day.
I would more be questioning her, why the fuck do you think he'd be getting this mail for an hour and 20 minutes?
According to her, she sees him sitting there reading something. So she's
at
thinking,
12 p.m.
Yeah, so she's thinking,
also,
maybe he went to go get the mail.
This is him out of sight a mere 40 minutes after that alleged call was supposed to come. 40 minutes later, you're just going to leave your house or leave where no one can find you, and that call might still be coming.
He's somewhere in the house. You would think, allegedly, he's somewhere in that house.
Did he have an answer for where he was?
Well, I will get into some of their defense in part 3, what they have to say.
That's what we call a teaser, folks.
Later on, it would be determined that John Ramsey wouldn't have to leave the house to go check the mail because the front door had a mail slot. So they would just slide it in.
Hour and 20 minutes. Go check that mail slot.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Linda Arndt was left with a cell phone, which she was told to use for communication. Shortly after 12 p.m., she starts to feel like she's losing control of all the people in the house, and she sent 2 pages for backup. It's not clear on what happened. I don't know if it was because she lost sight of John Ramsey or if something happened that caused her to be like, okay, I need backup. It's not specified anywhere, but she sent 2 pages out from her cell phone for backup. No one from the Boulder Police Department responds to Detective Linda Arndt's pages for backup, let alone even give her a call to see what the issue is. They just completely ignored her.
What are they doing at this time? They're just
That's
back at the
wild.
station?
What did she ever say? What made her call for backup? Was
She
she ever
did not.
questioned?
She gives some goofy ass interview years later where she's talking real weird about how she was like making sure she had enough bullets in her gun, like making things sound real dramatic.
Yeah,
and
I saw that.
But she doesn't really specify on what exactly happened that made her be like, I need backup.
And
now.
nobody ever thought to ask her. That on record, at least.
Or unless she didn't want to go on record. I don't know.
Like, what was everyone doing during this time? And what was the plan? Like,
Well,
no one
that's-
was formulating our next steps or
That's what I'm
an
wondering.
investigation or anything? Like,
If
were they
she's
just sitting
asking-
there?
If she's asking for backup, what are they doing? What is she seeing? And then, but why isn't she talking about it?
Based off what I read, the only thing I could think of is that John Ramsey's unaccounted for. So she's like, okay, I need somebody else here because I can't keep an eye on everybody.
I can't go look for him and leave the whole rest
Right.
of the room unattended.
Right. That's what you would think. But then we're going to get to this next part. Well, before we get to this next part, Heather Cox, who was watching Burke at the White's home, received a phone call and was told by Priscilla White to bring Burke Ramsey back to the Ramsey home. Here's the part I was talking about. According to Linda Arndt, around 1 p.m., she wanted to give John Ramsey something to do, so she asked him to search the house, which makes absolutely no sense. If that's her problem, is that she can't keep an eye on everybody, why tell him to go leave again and search the house?
Why also send not a police officer or an investigator to
Right.
go start searching the house and touching things?
That, and it's 6 hours later now. Every square inch of this house hasn't been searched yet, which is crazy. How is that possible? I mean, I know it's a 7,000 square foot house, but
and also, why did you leave one person to cover all of that?
what have you been doing this whole time?
This makes no sense.
It's just one
I think
thing
that's
after
the
another.
150th time you said that this episode, and I think you've been right every
I'm trying
time.
to come up with new words to say because, yeah.
This is not realistic. We'll go with
And
that one.
and I've listened to other podcasts cover this subject leading up to this just to kind of get a vibe of how everybody was reporting on this. A lot of people tiptoe around saying, I don't want to be too hard on the Boulder Police Department. A lot of other true crime podcasts say that. That's bullshit. This is the most incompetent series of events by a police department I have ever researched in my life.
Yeah, I've never heard of such a thing.
If you're losing control of the situation, why would you send, and he was unaccounted for all that time, why would you send him wandering around the house? Say, you know what, John, you need something to do. Why don't you
Right,
just go
right.
search the house? What does that even mean?
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Well, the fact that the house hadn't been searched yet.
No one's been in the wine cellar room
Seriously?
at this point.
Or closed off so that people can't just be in there wandering around. There should be no private citizens in that house and probably 8 to 10 detectives searching the entire house.
In all fairness
Yeah.
to the police, as far as at least Fleet White, Priscilla White, and the Fernies being in there, they were called immediately before the police even got there. So they were
They were
already
there.
So they could have easily just walked into the house before the police even knew anything. You know what I mean? We're still getting a grasp on the situation. So but they should have all been put into the same room.
Right. By this point, it should have been contained at least.
Yeah.
Or they should have been asked to leave or whatever.
She sends John off to search the house. Some stories say that she went to Fleet White and not John Ramsey. That she went to Fleet White and said, hey, go get John to go with you and search the house. Doesn't matter which way it went. It's still ridiculous. Regardless of who asked who, head detective Steve Thomas says that they were instructed to search the house from top to bottom. However, John Ramsey decided to go directly to the basement instead.
Well, head detective wasn't even there.
No, he was not.
Was he there at all,
secondhand
period?
account.
Did he show up initially?
Not this day. Not this first day. He was not there.
Okay. He was on vacation too?
According to Steve Thomas's notes, John Ramsey led Fleet White to the basement, where they first went to the train room and examined the broken window. John told Fleet that he had broke it a few months ago.
A few months.
It's just, I break a fucking window, whatever. I'll fix it someday.
This is also Colorado in winter. Is it not now freezing in that basement? And you're talking about a kid's playroom?
That's true.
The whole thing is strange. I mean,
All of it.
Yeah.
I just don't find that very believable.
I
I
mean,
don't find any of that part about John breaking parts of his house to get in. I don't find any of that believable.
It's a weird tidbit.
Yeah.
And this broken
In
window's
Colo-
big enough for someone to climb in the window, too.
And that's a whole debate in itself, because there's people that say that it's not possible.
But the guy that recreated it, they showed him climbing in the window.
Yeah, but initially people were saying, no, it's not possible to climb through that window.
Just the fact that it is debatable whether or not a person could fit through it means that hole is still big enough to have that debate in Colorado in December in a kid's playroom. And you're just going to let that go for months. Or there's a bunch of these holes for months. This house would be freezing cold. It's just not likely that's plausible.
Agree.
It makes no sense.
Anyway, so they search the train room. We're all getting fired up at different things in this episode.
The men searched. We're going to need a couple cool down beers after all this.
Well, and Dave's going to need his salmon spread for his bagel after this one.
Getting hungry now.
So the men next searched a shower stall that was located in the basement. John Ramsey then noticed a fireplace cover propped up in front of a closet, and Fleet White moved it so the closet could be searched. They found nothing, so they moved to the wine cellar room. At 1:04 p.m., according to Steve Thomas's notes, John Ramsey entered the wine cellar room first, turned on the light, and discovered JonBenet's dead body. He yelled something in regard to that discovery, which is debated on what he yelled. It's reported multiple different ways, something along the lines of, "Oh God, my baby," things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's also another version out there that says John Ramsey yelled before the light was turned on, which, if that's true, that makes absolutely no sense because Fleet White had opened that door before and didn't turn on the light and didn't see anything.
Well, again,
Unless John
the implication that he knew what he was going to
He was putting
see.
on a show.
Yeah, right.
But then that report would have come from Fleet, correct? The report that he screamed before the light came on? Is that consistent with anything Fleet has said since? Like, I'm just wondering where the two reports came from if there was only one
It's just
witness.
reported multiple ways in the media is what I was basing this off of.
What has Fleet said? Or has that not been...
Some of that grand jury testimony
Yeah,
that
that's-
you're never going to hear.
Yeah. JonBenet had black duct tape covering her mouth, a cord around her neck that was attached to a wooden paintbrush, and her hands were bound over her head in front of her. Her hands weren't tied very tight. When they examined her, they were able to just slip them right off. It was not tight.
Okay. So not really bound.
Right. She was covered by a light-colored blanket. The blanket covered her torso, but not her head, arms, or legs. John Ramsey ripped the duct tape from JonBenet's mouth and attempted to undo the bindings on her hands. Fleet White ran upstairs yelling, "Called 911," and then ran to the back office located on the first floor to a telephone. Detective Linda Arndt used her cell phone to call 911, and John Ramsey carried JonBenet upstairs and put her on the kitchen floor, contaminating the crime scene of the wine cellar room. It could be natural reaction.
Sure.
All of that
Yeah,
could be
that's-
natural reaction. Pulling the duct tape from her mouth. You're not going.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, your first thought isn't that she's dead. It's just try to save her. So
Right.
sure. But then again, if you did it, you're covering up by your presence there any physical evidence that might be
right.
present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If you subscribe to that theory that he did something when he was out wandering around when Linda Arndt couldn't account for him, and then when she told him to go search, that he,
Mm-hmm. He went right there.
yeah. Then, for whatever reason, Linda Arndt further contaminates the crime scene by picking JonBenet's body up again and moving it to the living room by the Christmas tree.
That's just weird. Why move it again?
This is where John Ramsey kneels beside the body and repeatedly says something like "my little angel" over and over again. And friends had to carry Patsy Ramsey because she was like ready to pass out, is how it's reported.
And this is where we go back to the interview that you referenced with Linda Arndt, where she's all wacky talking about the number of bullets in her gun, and
Yeah, and her eyes are like real huge.
she said that they had a weird nonverbal exchange after she told John that JonBenet was dead already, and then she's clutching her gun. She said, "I didn't know if when anyone else got here, if we'd all still be alive."
Yeah, she got real dramatic.
Weird.
Yeah.
Like
Who had a nonverbal exchange?
this Detective Arndt and John Ramsey, after she told him that she was dead. Like she just got a weird vibe from him, and
He didn't know she was dead, like when he found her body.
the detective said John asked her if she was dead.
Oh,
And it's a weird interview with Elizabeth Vargas, like 20 years ago, maybe.
Yeah. It's a strange interview for sure.
Yeah.
okay.
Linda Arndt ordered Fleet White to stand by the door to the basement and guard the door. But for whatever reason, Fleet decided to run downstairs to the basement and get the duct tape from the basement floor and bring it back upstairs.
Sure.
And he's just like, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
That's just so weird too. Like, why would that be your mindset? I'm gonna go get that piece of duct tape.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're gonna find it. Well, maybe not the way this investigation's went, but still, like, just fucking leave it.
Yeah. This is all taking place between 1:04 p.m. and 1:23 p.m. At approximately 1:30 p.m., Priscilla White calls her home to stop Burke from being brought back to the house. Around this time, officers Ron Walker and Larry Mason returned to the scene, saw JonBenet's body, searched the home, and finally, after almost 8 hours, the full house is declared a crime scene.
Yay.
So we're there.
Man.
Shortly after the body was found, John Andrew Ramsey, Melinda Ramsey, and Stuart Long arrived at the Ramsey house. Stuart Long is Melinda Ramsey's boyfriend. Between 1:30 p.m. and 2 p.m., detectives overheard John Ramsey on the phone telling his pilot to get the plane ready that they were going to fly to Atlanta. This is just another really weird, strange
It's
detail.
like
with
10
this
minutes
case.
after he found her body.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Who reported that?
Or
Do
half
we know?
hour.
Or
The police. The police overheard him talking on the phone talking to his pilot saying, we're going to get the plane ready. We're going to Atlanta. And the police stopped him. At least they did this right. And they stopped him. They're like, you can't leave.
Yeah.
That's so odd.
Like, why? You can't leave this crime scene. They're not even telling him he's a suspect at this point. I mean, he's going to be, but.
So I saw a later interview with him where they asked him about that, and he just, said the police were taking over the house and they had to go somewhere. Like, that's your dead kid's body
Get a
laying in there, and you're
fucking
thinking about getting on a
hotel?
plane?
Yeah, stay at your friends who
I don't know.
could be at your house within 4 minutes and you're close by. Like, why would you leave the city?
Yeah, it's
I don't
very
know.
odd.
That's one thing I think, like you said earlier, Ian, I could confidently say if I was in that situation, I would want to be as close as possible to home if I was dealing with this situation. I wouldn't want to leave and go a whole country, the entire country away to the East Coast and go to Georgia.
I'm going to say it again. It makes absolutely no sense why you would behave that way.
Yeah.
That's extremely strange. That's really strange behavior. John Ramsey signed a search warrant to allow the house to be searched, which I really don't even know why the police would need that at this point, but I guess maybe they're covering all their bases. I guess, I don't know. You would think that they would just be like, I mean, they can smell weed in your car and be like, yeah, you're fucking
right.
giving me the whole car.
But they find a body in your basement. We need you to sign this. We just like to look around.
We're not sure we have probable cause in this scenario.
Because we're amateur police officers.
And people that think the Ramseys had nothing to do with this point this out as like a good thing for the Ramseys. Say, hey, he's got nothing to hide. He signed off on this,
The fuck else are you going to do?
Well, then he came out later and said, I didn't know that was a search warrant. I thought I was just signing off on the autopsy.
Jeez.
Which, okay, if you're in distress, maybe you're not paying attention. But at this point, there's a lot of what ifs with this guy.
Yeah, and it's made to seem like he wouldn't have signed that search warrant initially without. And
which, why would you not if you were innocent?
Yeah, and
I would say search everything,
But then that's our PSA. We're always like, hey, you better lawyer up.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that. If you're innocent, why wouldn't you theory?
I would. In this situation, why not? Your kid's dead, and if you didn't do it, I would say go ahead. Anything else you find is fine. But
Well, there's a lot of people that didn't do it that are sitting in jail right now.
Yeah.
is it wrong for me to say he's a rich white guy? He doesn't have to worry about that.
It's not wrong of you to
That's
say.
exactly right.
Yeah. It's the truth.
100% the truth.
My point was, if I'm in this situation, I'm going to sign that, no questions asked. Yeah. And I'm going to know what it is. I'm not going to claim later I didn't.
Yeah.
If I'm innocent, I'm going to go ahead and sign that.
Regardless, like, I don't understand why they even needed it, but he says he thought it was the autopsy thing. So
it's just another odd side note.
Yeah. It
pile
goes
up.
Right, and it just goes back and forth. You can be like, hey, he's doing the right thing, and people on the other hand say, no, he's bullshit. He's trying to hide something. He thought he was signing something else. Going back to Linda Arndt moving the body for a second time, she allowed someone to take a blanket and place it over the body once it was moved to the living room. I'm not sure if this was Patsy that did it or someone in that house at that time put a different blanket over her body. Then to go even further, JonBenet's feet were still sticking out from the blanket, so Linda Arndt allowed a Colorado Avalanche sweatshirt to be placed over her feet. Again, contaminating the crime scene, allowing any hairs, fibers, anything that could have been on that blanket or sweatshirt to transfer over to JonBenet's clothing or her body.
I mean, understandable that you would want to cover her body at that point, but I mean...
But as a police officer, you'd be like, you can't do that.
Even if they do ultimately find DNA or fingerprints or anything, it's all contaminated. It's going to be inadmissible at this point. It's worthless.
And also probably they shouldn't have had other people there that are able to just put stuff on the body. As soon as you have the body, everyone needs to get the fuck out of the house. This is a crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you live there or not, you need to get out of this house.
Yeah.
No one should have access to go just throw blankets on this body.
Or grab a sweatshirt.
Or grab a sweatshirt, wherever.
Or be in the same room, quite frankly.
Yeah. To even have to worry about covering it up.
Shortly after John signed the consent to search form, the Ramseys left their home to go stay with the Fernies. This includes John's older children, John Andrew, Melinda, and her boyfriend. Sometime during the afternoon, John Ramsey called and requested a visit from Michael Bynum, who is reported to be John Ramsey's close friend and corporate attorney. During this visit, John hired Michael to represent him, and Michael advised John to hire additional lawyers, one for Patsy and a separate one for Burke. How this is said is that Michael Bynum had connections in the Boulder Police Department, and he caught word that they're going to make this all about you. So we need to get ahead of this, which makes sense.
Complete sense.
And a lot of people point to that it's strange to have 3 separate lawyers, and have one for the kid and everything, or for Burke. But we have our lawyer friend, and he said that this is just a wealthy guy covering all his bases and can afford to make smart legal decisions.
And smart. I mean, still 100% stand by. Don't ever talk to the police without your attorney present. And clearly you have to realize you're a suspect at this point.
I don't know. For me, it's very hard to even comprehend. That's where my head would go. I don't think that's something I would even think about. You just found your daughter brutally murdered. And within, an hour or two, you're lawyering up? I don't think I would even be able to think logically, let alone start thinking about, I'm going to get blamed for this.
Well, like I said, how this is told is that Michael Bynum was like, hey, I caught word that they're making this all about you.
And reached out to them.
Right.
Okay, well, that's different. That makes more sense.
Well, I mean, if you find a dead kid in the house, the family's just by default going to be the number one suspect.
I don't disagree with that either. I just don't think if it's my own kid and I'm innocent, I'm not even going to think about that. I don't understand how I couldn't understand how I would even think about that. For days, I would be riddled with grief.
Well, yeah.
But yet I'm going to think about protecting myself.
Yeah, but your friend with an inside contact.
Well, that's why I said if he contacted me or if he contacted them, I think that's different.
Yeah.
Because I feel like our lawyer friend would probably contact one of us if something similar to this ever happened, would probably contact us and say, hey, you need to hire somebody.
I hope so.
And I think that's different as opposed to I was understanding it as John contacted him. But if he reached out to John, then I think that makes more sense.
I agree. Yeah. And we'll be right back.
We like to drink beer, a lot of it. After a long night of drinking and talking crime and conspiracies, there's nothing that wakes us up and gets us ready to start the day better than Just Brew coffee. With a great selection of roast levels to choose from, you're guaranteed to find one that suits your style. Small batch roasted to highlight the unique features of each coffee bean, Just Brew coffee caters to both casual and hardcore coffee drinkers alike. Since 2010, Just Brew Coffee has worked tirelessly to perfect the roasting process and technique, which has resulted in seriously delicious, always flavorful, and never bitter tasting coffee. If you're already drinking JBC, raise your mug. If you're not, raise your standards. Check out their online store at youjustbrew.com and up your coffee game today. Use code NECRO15 to receive 15% off your order of 2 pounds or more. And remember, they roast, you just brew.
So before we get into the details on the autopsy and what happened to JonBenet, I just want to hit on some further incompetence and contamination. When Dr. Meyer used fingernail clippers to clip JonBenet's nails for potential DNA regarding defensive measures like her scratching her attacker, he used the same clippers for all her fingers, even though he should have used separate and sterile clippers for each one. So, I mean, if she nicked someone with her middle finger and not her index, it's contaminated.
Mm-hmm.
It was also later learned that the coroner's office sometimes used the same clippers on different autopsy subjects.
Jesus.
That doesn't sound good at all.
Just doing whatever we want out here.
Yeah.
I wonder how prevalent that is in crime labs across the. I mean, how many innocent people are in fucking prison because of something like that? Whew.
And this is the thing with with conspiracy theories and stuff. I feel like I might be getting ahead of myself with some of this, but 9 times out of 10, I feel like conspiracy theories are just incompetent and or lazy people handling a situation, and it leaves the door open for all kinds of nonsense to be placed in to fill the holes.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of this can just be blamed on incompetence. A lot of the missteps here. And it just leaves the door open for all kind of other bullshit to be piled on top.
You mean for like this story specifically?
Yeah.
I would agree
you
that
could
it
say the
seems
same
like
thing with
that.
most conspiracy theories, in my opinion.
So what you're alluding to is that you think there's a pretty straightforward answer, but because of the incompetence by the police, it's opened the door for all these conspiracy theories.
Right.
Okay.
Because any conclusion you come to is suspect because of all these things that took place. I get that. That makes sense to me.
I think that, yeah.
There's also an issue with the time of death. There was never truly a time of death placed on JonBenet in this case. Her autopsy lists her time of death at 1:23 p.m., which is the agreed time, or the agreed upon time that her body was brought up from the wine cellar. The coroner's office put out a statement defending themselves regarding this, saying an unwitnessed time of death or an unwitnessed death is hard to put a time of death on. And I get that, but it just, to me, this comes off lazy, and I'm not completely sure why they couldn't shrink that window down a little bit.
I feel like isn't that very odd to mark the time of death as the discovery of the body?
Yeah.
Like they're always, like we covered the Chris Benoit one, they were able to put like almost to the hour based on the decomposition when the bodies were discovered.
That happens all the time.
When they died. Like that's so fucking weird.
I mean, every dead body doesn't have an eyewitness at what the time that they actually expired.
Right. And I've never heard of it posted as the time that they found the body.
I mean, they estimate based on decomposition and rigor mortis and all kinds of things. Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked about the pineapple. We've alluded to it.
We've been alluding to that goddamn pineapple.
And we're going to get to it. But based off of that, experts were able to narrow this window down, and we'll get to it. But she was last seen at 10 p.m., and I know there's other experts that have looked at the rigor mortis that had set in at the time. You would think that you could shrink this window down, and not just put 123 on it.
Not you would think. You can.
Yeah.
Why didn't they?
And they just mark it as an estimated time of death on the death certificate, right? Isn't that how it's
I would
usually
imagine
done?
so, because you don't never know for sure.
Yeah.
This is what I mean about laziness and incompetence that can open the door for all kind of bullshit. This is, in my opinion, this is completely asinine.
Well, and this is not even the police department now. This incompetence is spread to the coroner's office.
Right.
And I just don't know, I don't know who oversees the coroner.
the county, right?
It's an elected official in most places.
Like, how do you take that and accept that as the answer? Like, there was no one that said no. I mean,
well, the coroner
go do your
is the
fucking
authority on the certificate. I don't know that it can be questioned.
that's what I'm asking. Like,
I don't think it can be questioned.
Yeah, he's the head guy in charge. Look, if you're
wonder if
using
that
this,
jackass won re-election. I'd hope not.
if you're using the same fingernail clippers on multiple bodies, I don't think it's outside the realm to just be like, just fuck it, throw a time on there.
I mean, if you're lazy in one area, it's likely you're
No,
lazy
you're right.
in several
I mean,
other areas.
Since that 911 call was placed at 5:52, the police have handled this poorly.
Yeah, everybody involved has handled it completely ridiculous. And then Steve Thomas, who wrote a good book about this, and he wasn't there that day.
Who was Steve Thomas?
The
Again?
head detective, but
one.
he was not there that day. So, and he's playing catch up on all this stuff, and it's already fucked.
Why was he not there that? Was he just off?
Yeah, because it's Christmas.
It's the day after Christmas.
Yeah, but it's
Who was in charge that day?
Nobody, apparently.
Dwight Schrute, volunteer deputy.
And this is the guy I think that we learn later refused help from the FBI when they offered it because he thought, I'm gonna do things my way.
Yeah,
I think that's the guy, right?
yeah, and
How'd that work out, Pally? Take some more days off.
there's also an issue. I think we'll get into it in part 3 of politics getting involved, where the police didn't like the DA because of his politics, and everybody couldn't work together just based off of their political beliefs, and shit got really muddy just based on just ego and that kind of stuff.
That's what happens.
One more note, and we'll clear this up later on too. Some things we're going to bring up when it comes to JonBenet's injuries are going to be from a defamation lawsuit filed against the Ramseys by a guy named Chris Wolf. The Ramseys named him as a suspect in their book, so he came back and sued them. Federal Judge Julie Carnes ruled in the Ramseys' favor, and some things regarding her injuries are going to be brought up from her ruling. I'm not saying that she's correct or anything. I'm just saying we're going to cover all bases, and all of it's really up for debate. Just to clear up who Chris Wolf is, he was a reporter in Boulder, Colorado, and the Ramseys claimed he was a suspect in the book.
Well, that's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
And he'll be one of the suspects we discuss in part 3.
Right.
We'll see you next week, folks.
So getting to the autopsy, pathologist John E. Meyer said,
"The body of a 6-year-old female was first seen by me after I was called to an address identified as 749 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. I arrived at the scene at approximately 8 o'clock p.m. and entered the house where the decedent's body was located. At approximately 8:20 p.m., I initially viewed the body in the living room of the house. The decedent was lying on her back on the floor, covered by a blanket and a Colorado Avalanche sweatshirt. On removing these 2 items from the top of the body, the decedent was found to be lying on her back with her arms extended up over her head. The head was turned to the right. A brief examination of the body disclosed a ligature around the neck and a ligature around the right wrist. Also noted was a small area of abrasion or contusion below the right ear on the lateral aspect of the right cheek. A prominent dried abrasion was present on the left lower neck. After examining the body, I left the residence at approximately 8:30 p.m.
So it took 6.5 hours she lay there until the coroner got there?
yeah,
I didn't even think of that.
6.5 hours?
What the fuck was happening during that time? What was the coroner doing?
I mean, there's not a lot of murders in Boulder, Colorado.
JonBenet Ramsey was the only murder to happen that year in Boulder, Colorado.
There you go.
Wondering if they had a call from another county, get another coroner to come in, if he was on also Christmas vacation.
I mean, I know
But it's still 6 hours.
I like watching that show, that First 48 that's on A&E every once in a
Yeah.
while. I know from watching that bodies lay there for a while
Can you
before
first
coroners show
48?
up.
They've killed almost 24 hours in just what's led to this.
Yeah.
Fucking just shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe that's how it is. Maybe that's not that out of the ordinary.
I mean, I can't remember like a specific time, but I can
Why
remember.
is it so hard? You're an elected official, then, motherfucker, you're on call for this shit.
You would think so.
Yeah. And I mean, in fairness to the First 48, those are big cities where there's shit going down all the time.
True.
But
So maybe that's why it takes them a longer to get there. Like,
but I do remember watching some episodes and being like looking at the clock, you know, at the bottom when they like roll how much time has passed. I'm like, God damn, that person's been laying in the middle of the street for a long ass time.
I mean, is it more likely that the police, you know, and City Hall, everyone was huddled up talking with the coroner about how to handle this? That seems more likely.
Possibly. Yeah, I
That's
didn't even
the
think
delay.
of that.
why that though? Why?
Just the same kind of CEO rich person treatment we've been discussing this whole time.
Yeah.
I don't know, just supposing.
No. And in this story, I mean, that makes more sense to some of the shit they did.
So at 10:45 p.m., JonBenet Ramsey's body was removed from the home to go have the autopsy performed.
That was again another 2 hours later.
And she's just been laying there forever. Like I said, when I watched that show a couple times, I'm thinking like, man, that they've left that person laying out. I mean, they're covered and everything, but I'm sure she was in a body bag at this point.
Yeah.
But it's like, man, they left that person laying there for a long time. So the official cause of death was, quote, asphyxia by strangulation associated with cranial cerebral trauma.
So
Meaning her head got bashed in.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Ian sent me a list of, what was it? Like the autopsy, like list of injuries.
Kind of the summary.
And because I live a very rich and fulfilling life, I spent my Friday night sitting at my computer Googling all of these terms to kind of break it down simply for us.
I very much appreciate it. I was feeling extremely bogged down by all these fancy words that I have no idea what they mean.
And it started off slow for me, like figuring them all out. But then once I figured out like a few of them, I was like, oh, okay. And I was able to kind of breeze my way through them.
Are you considered a medical professional at this point?
Well, this is why I got hired as a volunteer because
okay.
of this knowledge now.
You're
So, like, if you're on a plane and they call for a doctor, will you stand up now because you know all these injuries and how to treat them?
Like hostage negotiation, and then also I can perform autopsies.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's it. No, I can't save your life. I can tell you how you died. Like, oh, that motherfucker choked on that pretzel. You know, something like that. I put that in my official report. Time of death? Tuesday. Because apparently that's what passes in Boulder, Colorado.
If you were with a guy and he started foaming at the mouth, would you give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to save his life? Not just a guy, anyone. Just someone, some guy, some girl, some kid.
I don't think it would be needed. Would foaming at the mouth require...
Well, they stopped breathing, but they were additionally... This guy. Additionally foaming at the mouth.
Sure.
Okay.
To save someone's life, I would.
All right.
I'd try. I wouldn't know what the hell I was doing, but...
I'd be better if you called me after and said, hey, how'd this guy die? And I'd tell you and give you a report. That's where my talents would be better used. But I think I would.
Okay.
Would you? Or would it depend on who the person was? Like if it was a stranger, maybe not.
No, I think I would just start vomiting everywhere. I don't know that I physically
Well, I would imagine
could.
you'd wipe the foam away, right?
I'm getting sick just thinking about it.
Yeah. I understand. That would be gross.
I like to think I could, but I don't know.
I feel like I would try, but I would probably fuck it up worse than I'd probably do something wrong because I wouldn't know what the hell I was doing.
You've seen The Office. Staying alive.
That's true.
Staying alive. So the summary, I'll go through this as quick as I can. Ligature strangulation, which is essentially strangulation with a weapon of some sort, a cord or a rope. Circumferential ligature with associated ligature furrow of neck. Ligature furrow means a deep groove commonly caused by a cord or rope. Strangulation. This is a common kind of injury among hanging victims, kind of a deep groove or cut in their neck. Abrasions and petechial hemorrhages on the neck, which are essentially open wounds and red or purple spots on the skin of the neck caused by broken capillary blood vessels. Petechial hemorrhages, conjunctival surfaces of eyes and skin of face. These are essentially the same hemorrhages, the red or purple spots on the skin caused by broken capillaries, but these are now on the eyes and the face.
So if your eyes get bloodshot or like...
Right. Craniocerebral injuries, which are head and brain injuries, which we discussed. Scalp contusion, bruise on the top of the head or on the scalp. Linear comminuted fracture of right side of skull, which is a skull fracture. Linear pattern of contusions of right cerebral hemisphere. This is bruising on the brain. Subarachnoid and subdural hemorrhage. Subarachnoid is a life-threatening type of stroke caused by bleeding into the space surrounding the brain. So it's bleeding on the brain. And subdural means bleeding that often occurs outside the brain as a result of a severe head injury. Small contusions, tips of temporal lobes, that's bruising on the temporal lobe of the brain, which is commonly associated with auditory language and speech comprehension. Abrasion on the right cheek, which is essentially an open wound on the cheek. Abrasion and contusion on the posterior right shoulder, which is an open wound on the right shoulder. Abrasions of the lower back and posterior left lower leg, open wounds on the left lower back and back of the left leg. Abrasion and vascular congestion of vaginal mucosa. This is essentially abrasion is an open wound that's caused by the skin rubbing against a rough surface. Vascular congestion is engorgement or swelling of the blood vessels. So it's bruising and wounds and swelling in the vagina. Ligature of right wrist, which is bruising or marking on a wrist caused by the rope or cord.
That's a lot of injuries.
So that's how I spent my Friday night.
I appreciate it.
It's a real feel-good Friday.
Yeah.
It's a long list of things to happen to a little 6-year-old girl.
That's extremely depressing to think about.
So how we're going to do this, we're just going to start at the top and work our way down.
I mean, so that was the official autopsy report.
Correct.
And now we're going to jump ahead to this lawsuit with, what's the guy's name? Chris Ford?
Chris Wolf.
Chris Wolf, that happened years later, but because they extensively, dove in and analyzed the autopsy report, it's a good, example or a good discussion on what it actually all meant.
Yeah, and some of it's like everything else, some of it's debate. Some of the findings are debated. Most of the findings are actually debated. People argue a lot of this stuff, but
and there's like expert testimony by pathologists and outside sources on the report itself.
Yeah, it's not like average people are just weighing in here. They had top doctors and stuff.
So it's not like a Reddit discussion board.
Right.
Okay.
Some jackass on the internet. So her head injury. When JonBenet was first discovered, there was no sign of head injury. There was no blood at the scene and no damage to her head was visible. It wasn't until the autopsy was performed that it was discovered.
That seems very odd.
Well, we can bring him up now.
And that's according to who? I mean, I guess they could go back and they checked that there was no blood in the wine cellar, right? Like
yeah, there was nothing.
Before. So
you can see the crime scene photos online. There's no injury.
I know. I choose not to look at those.
There's no blood. Her hair's not bloody at all. So we're going to bring him up in a bit here. But Dr. Warner Spitz.
But the crime scene photos also of her body are not in the cellar. They're upstairs because she was moved.
Right. But still, there's no blood on her head.
Yeah. I guess that's plausible. I just feel like if you're going to, with the amount of injuries to her head, you would imagine there'd be some blood.
Well, not necessarily, right? Not with that type of injury?
Well, because Dr. Warner Spitz, we're going to talk about him in a little while, too. We're going to bring him up. But people who are real into true crime and stuff will know him from the West Memphis 3. Okay. The guy's been involved in tons of cases, but that's one of the big ones that he was involved in. He's the guy that... Remember how the kids' genitals were all mutilated in that case?
I'll be honest, I am not really that familiar with that case.
Oh, okay. So
possibly a future episode for us.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the 3 boys that were found dead, their genitals, or at least one of their genitals was mutilated, and that's what the prosecution ran with said it was mutilation. Werner Spitz looked at it because the boys were in a pond or in a creek. He looked at it and immediately he was like, this is not mutilation. This is turtles biting on their dead body, which, jeez. I mean, animals do that, but he was like, this is bites by a turtle. And he was part of the help of getting them off. So his opinion of looking at, as far as the head injury is concerned, is that a 6-year-old's, their scalp is more flexible than an adult's. And when you're bringing down something blunt, this wouldn't be sharp like people point to a golf club, because we'll get into it. Burke hit her with the golf club back in the day before. He says that you could hit a child with something blunt like that in the top of their head and their scalp would form to it and it wouldn't cause
it makes sense. Like
the skin's pliable and it'll just cave in with the skull and not actually
with something blunt.
Open up.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
That's his opinion on that. The fracture in her skull measured 8 inches in length and 1.75 inches wide.
That's an enormous hole.
There was a rectangular area of this fracture toward the middle, caused by what you would assume would be whatever hit her. And this rectangular area was 1.75 inches by ½ inch. Dr. Meyer found a small amount of blood outside the brain, but could not specify in the autopsy whether it was the blow to the head that actually caused her death or if it was the strangulation.
He couldn't tell what came first.
Right. He does not make any judgments on that.
Well, I'm sure they were both in close proximity time-wise to each other, right? So I'm sure that's hard to make that call.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that's
During that lawsuit, according to Michael Doberson, Judge Julie Carnes' ruling says, quote, although no head injury was visible when she was first discovered, the autopsy revealed that she received a severe blow to her head shortly before or around the time of murder. Presence of hemorrhage does indicate that the victim was alive when she sustained the head injury. However, the relative small amount of subdural hemorrhage indicates that the injury occurred in the premortem, parentheses, close to death period. So they're saying the lack of bleeding in the brain would mean that she was pretty close to being dead.
Meaning she was already being strangled and it wasn't working quick enough and they decided to finish her off?
Or did someone find her close to death and then decided to finish her off?
There's also theories of if you're going down the road of
We're just kind of spitballing.
Yeah.
Here. We're going down a deep dive.
if you go down the road of that it was a sexually motivated person, an outside intruder that was sexually motivated, there's theories that they were strangling her for sexual purposes. They thought that they had killed her because they choked her too hard, got frustrated, and hit her on the top of the head. Because there's also there's some evidence that experts point to with the temporal bruising in her brain that the autopsy says that you would get that is common when you shake a child
Trying to
really
revive
hard.
her.
Right. So the person could have thought they choked her too hard and started shaking her, which would give her the bruising on their on the temporal lobes. Also quoted in the judge's findings was, quote, the court has not been able to determine from the record how close to death the premortem period would have been. So they just believe that it happened shortly before, but they can't tell how close to death it was. As far as what could have caused the blow to the head, there is a flashlight that gets brought into question a lot. There was a heavy black police-style flashlight that was found in on the Ramsey's kitchen table. And in their 1998 interview with the police, they said that it didn't belong to them. Police found that this flashlight had been wiped of all fingerprints, including the batteries inside.
Okay.
And going back to Dr. Werner Spitz, he fully believes that it was the flashlight that caused the head. And I watched a thing where he recreated it. Like
I saw that too.
yeah, and it made the skull
Caved the head in.
almost exactly the same look.
I mean, have you ever went in your kitchen and found like a Maglite, big, black flashlight sitting on your table that wasn't yours? I mean, come on.
Right.
Where'd it come from?
That's odd.
And it's wiped down of all fingerprints,
Yeah.
including the batteries.
But there's also been a ton of people and a ton of cops in the house too. It's just
Like
it's
was
just
somebody
weird.
might have left it sitting there.
It's
You
just
mean?
weird. Like
The police, it was not a police issue. It was just police style. It was not the same brand that the Boulder police issued.
It fits.
It made
Yeah.
according
Sitting
to
there.
yeah, it's just weird. I mean, there's so many people in the house at this point that it's it's questionable who brought it there. Is what I'm saying. I'm not saying it sounds like it probably could have been used, but who's to say where it came from?
But what's the
Because
scenario?
You've also had so many people in the house.
Right. What's the scenario where you did this in the basement, but then you brought the flashlight back up to the kitchen? Well, I guess as you're writing the ransom note to cover your unanticipated murder.
That's what. But like the same thing as the ransom note for a body that's already killed in the basement. You're just trying to throw people off. Maybe, I don't know. But if you had done a thorough investigation, maybe you would have noticed that flashlight sitting there at 6 a.m. when you entered the home, and then you could have documented that it was already sitting there. Meanwhile, we don't know when this flashlight was discovered, right? I mean, it was just kind of there.
Yeah.
No one knows when it showed up there.
Yeah, no, I mean,
No one was
you would
paying
presume
attention.
it was whenever the police showed up because it was not a police issue.
Or,
Flashlight.
or was it later? The bagel people, wiped it down because they spilled.
Maybe they
cup
moved
of coffee
it.
on
Maybe
it.
they
Yeah,
moved
right.
it off of an end table and were cleaning something up and just put it there. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many people in the home, you don't know who's touching what. Maybe when they're having people search the home, someone grabbed it to look in a cupboard or a closet and then set it down.
Well, and then they go, "Oh my God, I shouldn't have touched this." Then they wiped it down.
You get scared.
I mean, this
just
is what
protect
happens.
yourself,
This is
right.
what happens when you don't run a crime scene properly. That you open all this potential evidence
Right.
Yeah.
up to this.
Regardless, the Ramseys say that they did not own it, so it did not come from them,
Allegedly.
allegedly.
Well, and most people don't own a big Maglite flashlight, right?
That, I mean, he did work for a company that probably had stuff like this, right?
Probably, I guess. Dr. Ronald White, the director of the forensic pathology department at University of Miami School of Medicine, told Rocky Mountain News, quote, "The blow to her head, which Wright is convinced was not from a golf club, but more likely a blunt object such as a baseball bat or heavy flashlight, came first." And came first as in she was hit before she was strangled, which that just contradicts.
Yeah, that makes it a different
So-
crime altogether.
In part 3, we're going to talk more about this golf club, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll pin in that one.
We can
As
talk
you
about the baseball bat real quick because we just said the heavy flashlight. They did find a mags.
Well, a baseball bat would make sense if it was a flashlight and for the like of a blunt object.
Right.
If you're not going to cause blood, it would make sense.
There was a baseball bat found, but it had no DNA evidence or anything that would suggest that it was used.
And how common is a baseball bat in a home? Pretty common.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to like a, high grade flashlight.
Right.
It had no place probably in that home.
Yeah. There's also the issue of the green garland in her hair. Detective Linda Arndt told the Denver Post, quote, "According to Detective Linda Arndt, who witnessed the autopsy, green Christmas garland, like the garland decorating the spiral staircases in the house, was tangled in her hair. However, this detail was not noted in the autopsy summary released to the public, and there's really no reason to redact something like that. That's something you would include."
Yeah, I guess. Unless they thought
But
it was
why
just
was it not-
irrelevant. Side note.
Yeah, but
Why was it?
that's incompetence. If
Yeah.
you can't just
Yeah.
say it's irrelevant, you can't. I mean, yeah, you can't be like, she's got some
How
shit in her hair. I'm just gonna not report it.
That maybe matched the same green garland that the neighbor had on their. Yeah, exactly.
This might just show my lack of knowledge of true crime from whatever, but how common is it to have a publicly released autopsy report as opposed to stuff they keep hidden? Is that common?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's public record.
Like the full-fledged report.
I don't know. It's not.
No?
Mm-mm.
So
No, because this guy that people locally have brought up to us to cover,
Mm-hmm.
his is not public record.
Is it just a death certificate that's public record?
Yeah.
So
Not
if the
that
You have
police,
to push for the autopsy.
if the police said to this reporter or the coroner, "Hey, don't release that because we're investigating," and then he could just say, "Okay, I'm not going to put that in my report."
Wait, say that one more time.
If the police said to this coroner, "Hey, don't put that Garland thing because they said we're still investigating that and that could cause problems for our investigation," he could just say, "Okay, I'm going to exclude that from my public report." And then meanwhile, there's a hidden report or confidential report that we don't have access to.
It's possible.
I'm just asking, is that common in these types of situations?
I don't know if it's common, but I would say that that's possible. I guess.
Completely possible.
Yeah. That he didn't include it. It doesn't seem like it's something that you would not include, but yeah, I mean, he could.
Because Linda Arndt had more time with this body than probably anyone else.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I mean, if she's she should have been keeping the family away, but
I mean, she picked JonBenet up and moved her
right.
the second time. So yeah, I mean,
And she was present at the autopsy.
right.
And she's saying there's this green garland in the hair. That's an interesting one to me.
And some people say, I mean, that would lead you to suspect that JonBenet was carried down.
Well, that just changes, that sets up a whole narrative for the story, of what might have happened.
It sends you down a whole different path. The black duct tape that was on JonBenet's mouth was not sourced to the Ramseys' home. In Judge Carnes' opinion, the strip of duct tape found on JonBenet's mouth had bloody mucus on it and a, quote, perfect set of child's lip prints, which did not indicate a tongue impression or resistance. Quote, both ends of the duct tape found on her were torn, indicating it came from a roll of tape that had been used before. Animal hair alleged to be from a beaver was found on the duct tape, yet nothing in the defendant's home matches the hair, thereby suggesting either that the duct tape had been obtained from outside the home or it had been carried outside the home at some point. It's worth noting from Steve Thomas that none of Patsy Ramsey's fur coats or other garments that she owned that had fur were ever allowed to be tested.
Steve Thomas was
the head detective.
The head detective again.
That was something they wanted to do and they were not allowed to do.
They
Per
declined.
who? The family. Like, I don't know. That just seems weird to me. Like, obviously, we don't have beavers just all over the place here, but we have a lot of deer. Would there just be deer hair on a roll of tape you have in your garage, Dave? Like, that's odd.
Well, that's why it's
So the coats makes a lot of sense.
either if it's an outside intruder, they came in contact with one of the. If these coats have anything to do with it, you would think that the person either came in contact with the coat,
Which would be odd. Or
it's just another
piece that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
or what? Like they were outside hiding and it blew in the wind, a piece of hair, and landed on that tape. Like that just seems
That's extremely far fetched,
Right.
Yeah. You're
So
just
why
chilling
is there
outside and
beaver
beaver hair
hair?
is floating
That's what
around.
I'm saying. Like, we don't have a ton of beavers, but we have a ton of deer in this area. Every night I walk home from your house, I'm fucking walking a gauntlet of 8 or 10 of them staring at me, ready to
I
maul
don't
me to
know if I
bits.
believe this.
Dude, I swear. I will send you a picture the next time.
Gauntlet.
Dude, they're on both sides of the street.
They line up waiting for him to come.
And they just fucking stare at me, ready to mutilate me. I'm telling you, we'll be doing an episode on me and the case of the fucking devil deer. I'll send you a picture next time I walk past them. The point is, there are a ton of deer in this neighborhood at night.
Yeah.
Last week, you were driving me home and there was a deer in the on the sidewalk. So, I mean, they're there.
But
My point is,
I think we're talking about
my point is,
clothing, though, not someone coming into contact with an actual beaver, right?
but you were saying outside, if they came from outside.
This judge has ruled, in her opinion, that the presence of these beaver hairs in her opinion, means it came from outside the home. That the tape came from outside the home.
And
Steve Thomas
that would make people believe it came from somebody else's fur coat, not just wild animals
No one-
outside. Possibly.
She's not even saying fur coat. They're just saying these are beaver
She's just saying
hairs.
outside the home because we also don't know what mom's coats.
Right. That's what Steve Thomas
examined.
points out is that they were never tested. She had fur coats. I mean, I don't know what fur coats are made out of. I guess beaver.
I thought minks.
Maybe she had some
Beaver, too? I
don't
guess
know.
I don't know.
Maybe she had some bootleg ones
Maybe
where they
there's-
throw in some random animals.
Maybe there's some mutt ones, which is just a mix of all the
right.
hair.
That's what,
What's the Seinfeld episode? He buys the hairs and it was like from Street Rats, the hats. Remember that episode? You don't watch Seinfeld?
Like the Russian hat?
Yeah, remember they bought the Russian hats and it was supposed to be like mink or beaver and it was like made out of like rat hair.
yeah, I mean, you could. I would assume there's cheaper versions. Just because you're got a lot of money doesn't mean you're.
I don't know.
always
Beaver doesn't
buying
seem
shit.
cheap though. I don't think. Like
I don't know the value of animals, to be honest.
I don't either. Not a big game hunter.
I don't know. It seems like it'd be just as hard to catch a beaver as it is a mink, so.
I don't even know what a
Yeah,
mink
what the
is. To be
fuck's a
honest.
mink? Like a
little,
fox? Like
little
a fox?
same kind of small animal, I believe.
All I know is I am hunted every week I leave here, and those deer are looking at me. Fucking terrified me.
Why couldn't they?
They're gonna attack me.
Why couldn't they get a warrant to test these?
The coats.
To test the codes.
That's what I'm saying. Like, why? Maybe more of this treatment that we're talking about. They don't want to upset this family, but
See,
that just seems there's beaver hair on tape, and we don't necessarily know beaver hair to be made out of fur coats.
I'm going
And
to
it's-
Google it
it's
while you
not-
guys are debating this.
We're gonna have to go back and change all this when you prove us wrong. And it's not likely that fucking wild beaver hair is blowing on this tape. So
yeah. Well, it must be a thing, or it wouldn't be referenced in the ruling. I mean, beaver coats must exist, or it wouldn't even be a
I
question.
agree. I would imagine
No,
there's beaver coats.
the judge doesn't reference the coats. She just says that there's beaver hairs present.
I know, but I don't think we're talking about contact with wild beavers, are we?
Well,
maybe
she
the
rules
judge
in
would-
She is. She rules in favor of the Ramseys in this case, saying it was an outside intruder, that this tape must have come from outside. Regarding the findings of her vaginal area, doctors have thrown out different opinions on this. The general consensus is that there's no signs of conventional rape, which means a male inserting his penis.
Okay.
No signs of that.
No signs of that.
And I would imagine you'd be able to tell, on like a 6-year-old child,
Yeah.
that'd be pretty prevalent if there was like actual rape.
Yeah. As disgusting as it is to talk about.
Right.
Yeah. Molestation would have been from a finger or another foreign object. Some doctors also point that because JonBenet had issues of bedwetting, this could be caused from excessive or hard wiping. There's experts that have thrown that out, that that's possible.
Wow. Because there was, like we said earlier, there was signs of trauma internally.
Right.
There was swelling, there was bruising. But they said it wasn't consistent with conventional rape.
Right. But the general consensus from all that doctors and experts, and we'll get into it with the 2003 ruling, is that the Ramseys and outside doctor, everybody agrees that there was some form of sexual assault happened in her case.
Not exactly sure what, but something
took place. And we just brought up the bedwetting, so I want to touch on this for a minute because I'm not even going to acknowledge it in part 3. She was known to wet the bed pretty frequently. So prevalent that the housekeeper would come in to do the house and she would say that Patsy had already taken the sheets off the bed and like done that job because she kept wetting the bed. Some people point out that kids that are molested revert back to wetting the bed a lot. Mm-hmm. But I want to be 100% clear that there's no evidence and there's never been any evidence that the Ramseys ever molested her or that she was ever molested in the past. This is only like right before her death is what they're talking about here. Mm-hmm. So one of the theories is that Patsy got pissed off because she wet the bed for the millionth time and accidentally threw her or hit her or something along those lines. That is so absurd that I'm not even going to bring that up in part 3 because that's completely ridiculous. You look at the crime scene photos, look at that skull fracture. That was not done by a mom accidentally throwing a child because she was wetting the bed. And the mental gymnastics you have to do to piece all that together, putting a garage, not even a garage, this weird noose around her neck and for bedwetting, it makes no sense at all.
So the fact that you're even acknowledging it means that's a pretty prevalent theory out there.
It is.
Wow.
There's a lot of ridiculous shit out there about this.
And that spawned from the maid or the nanny or whoever, or who was the one that came out and said she wet the bed a lot?
Well, there was urine found on her underwear when she was dead.
So that's consistent with the story that she wet the bed.
Either she wet the bed or she...
Or even in the trauma.
Yeah, I mean, as graphic as this is, when you're strangled, if she died from being strangled to death, your body releases.
Yeah.
So it's possible that she either wet the bed or... Because people say that, oh, she had urine on her pants, so she wet the bed, Patsy got pissed off, but if you're strangled to death, you are going to urinate.
So there's literally people that just hear she wet the bed a lot, and occasionally mom would clean that up before the help got there.
Right.
And so now they're piecing together, oh, mom killed her in a fit of rage.
Yeah, and some people just, like I said, do like mental gymnastics, just jump through hoops to try and blame somebody in this case. And it's like that makes even less sense than anything else we've talked about, in my opinion.
That's the worst one yet. I mean, it's such a stretch to even come up with that. A lot of kids wet their bed.
And also really wild just to assume that a parent would kill their kid over that.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't even be comfortable stating something
let's
like
just
that.
say it's accidental, but you look at that skull fracture, and that is not an accident.
Well, that's what I mean. Like the injuries are not an accident. So
Right.
if you're stating that theory, I don't know how you can confidently state it was an accident.
I mean, even getting upset with a 6-year-old girl for wetting her bed seems a little absurd.
I
don't know.
I agree.
I mean, I could see it maybe after a millionth time and you'd being a little like, God damn it, but not to do anything remotely close to
Not to
this.
put your hands on them.
That's dumb.
I just wanted to touch on that because it's out there a lot. It was reported by RMN in 1998 that
Rocky Mountain News.
the quote, Boulder County coroner John Meyer, who conducted the autopsy on 6-year-old JonBenet, said the child's pubic area showed evidence consistent with having been wiped by a cloth. He did not include this information in the autopsy report, or at least that we know, because, I mean, that wasn't in the public one, like you pointed out, which I didn't even think of.
Weird.
But like you said, it could be in the non-public version.
Like the garland.
Yeah, like that, but this whole wiping of...
Yeah. So it looked like the pubic region was wiped by a cloth.
Right. That's what they reported on, that he said.
Is that unusual? I don't know.
But not by... It wouldn't be by him. It would have been by whoever did something to her.
Cleaned up of ejaculate?
Yeah.
That's what I first thought of. Like,
okay.
What else you cleaning up? Blood? But there wasn't necessarily signs of any blood.
Just a little bit.
So it could have been that, maybe.
Judge Carnes' findings regarding this, quote, both parties agree the autopsy report reveals injuries to JonBenet's genitalia consistent with sexual assault shortly before her death. Quote, the bleeding in JonBenet's genital area indicates she was alive when she was assaulted. Quote, her hymen was torn and material consistent with the wooden shards from the paintbrush used to make the garrote were found in her vagina. So that's probably about as dark as we're gonna get in this episode. That's the kind of stuff that just fired me up with doing this, because all these things make it sound like she was like we're just gonna point fingers at everybody. It just seems like it all gets lost, and no one actually wants to.
The brutality of this.
You want to blame a mom for accidentally killing her for wetting the bed, but you're not gonna look at the fact that a broken paintbrush was used to rape this child.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like that
doesn't fit that scenario.
Absolutely
at all.
Not. No.
I'm not even sure that fits a cover-up scenario. And again, we'll get to that in part 3, but
meaning like if you thought Burke did it and the
like
parents were just trying to cover it up, that's not what they would do. It just wouldn't happen.
You're not gonna
Yeah.
At least I don't think so. I don't think that's plausible.
The device used to strangle JonBenet was not a true garrote, as you would think when you watch or listen to something about this case, because everybody says garrote. It was more like a dog leash with a slip knot around her neck, leading to it being tied around a broken paintbrush handle that was sourced to be from the Ramsey's home. So Judge Carnes' findings regarding we're just going to call it a garrote because everybody else does, because it gets used so much in all these quotes. For the sake of this, we'll go along with it and say it's a garrote. Judge Carnes' findings, quote, JonBenet's body was bound with complicated rope slip knots and a garrote attached to her body. The garrote consisted of a wooden handle fashioned from the middle of a paintbrush found in the paint tray in the boiler room. The end of a nylon cord was tied to this wooden handle, and on the other end was a loop with a slip knot with JonBenet's neck within the loop. The end portion of the paintbrush used to construct the garrote was never found.
So there was a paintbrush in the home.
Right.
Who was the painter?
Patsy.
So mom's paintbrush. She had a room in the basement where she painted.
Right, I guess. Yeah.
Probably freezing from all those broken windows. Okay.
There's debate on whether or not these knots are sophisticated or not, if they would have been hard to make. Judge Carnes on the sophistication, quote, the slip knots and the garrote are both sophisticated bondage devices designed to give control to the user. Evidence from these devices suggests that they were made by someone with expertise using rope and cords, which cords could not be found or sourced within the defendant's home.
Meaning they brought them themselves.
Right. The cords, at least.
The cords. And presumably took the remaining piece of the paintbrush with them when they left.
But left the flashlight.
On the counter or on the kitchen table.
Right.
And the cords were used for what part?
The slip knot.
Was that not rope?
Oh, they say it's a nylon. In her quote, she's saying cord.
Okay. But they meant like the rope.
Yeah.
Because Okay, in the picture, it's a clear, like, rope type.
Just to clear up this next quote, Mary Keenan was the district attorney. Special prosecutor Mike Kane came back on Judge Carnes' ruling on the sophistication. He said, quote, "First of all, the thing I was going to say is if Mary Keenan has reached this conclusion, she clearly has not reviewed her own file because I don't want to get into a lot of specifics about this because of ethical reasons. But there are clearly in the police file answers to a lot of things that the court said had never been established. I don't know where this came from, that these were sophisticated knots. I don't know that anybody had the opportunity to untie those knots who was an expert in knots, but the police department had somebody who fit that category, and that was not the opinion of that person. These were very simple knots."
So again, just two different stories.
Two different opinions.
Constantly.
Yeah, that's all this story is just opinions. On whether or not the Ramseys could make the device, Judge Carnes said, quote, "No evidence exists that either defendant knew how to tie such knots." But many criticize this because John Ramsey had naval experience. Both he and Patsy were active sailors. They were on boats a lot, and Burke was in Boy Scouts. They would all have some form of knowledge in tying knots.
So contrary to what the judge said, literally everyone in the house knew how to tie knots, complicated knots.
And if you sail a fucking boat, you're going to know how to tie some fancy knots. Let's get into a little bit about where the cord came from.
And again, when you say cord,
the rope
cord,
the rope,
because the pictures show more of a rope.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear.
According to Judge Carnes' finding, quote, "Sources of the cord used in the crime were never located nor sourced to the defendant's home. Authorities determined that this cord was sold at Boulder Army Store and McGuckin's. Head detective Steve Thomas's book claimed that a receipt from McGuckin's for the exact amount of this particular type of cord was traced to the Ramseys."
That's huge.
Yeah, that's
huge.
Yeah, where's that piece of evidence?
Right.
That's a direct tie to the...
Yeah.
So where's the receipt?
He claims it.
Everyone wrote a goddamn book.
The head detective on this case says he has a receipt that puts this rope or cord, the exact price from this exact store where you can purchase, and clearly you couldn't find it at a lot of places. Yet that's the only time we hear about it, and it couldn't be found in their home.
Strange. So I bet it was in the grand jury testimony.
That's just why,
unless he's just making it up for his book.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that. It's either it was in the grand jury, like you said, or he just. It's one of those like Michael Scott type situations where I declare.
I declare bankruptcy.
You can just say whatever you want. Another big thing with this case is the stun gun theory. She has the abrasions that people said. Well, they're listed as abrasions in the autopsy report.
They look like bruises almost, right? Like two dark holes.
Yeah, and so a lot of people say that those are could be from a stun gun. It's another high.
Looks like it.
Yeah, I mean this is another thing that's a huge debate. No stun gun was ever found, but the marks on JonBenet's body to some were consistent with a stun gun. The stun gun thing seems to be more consistent with an intruder theory because there's no evidence that the Ramseys owned a stun gun.
But I guess also the rope, like
we don't know if they really own the rope or not because.
But there is somebody saying there's a rope tied to them.
Right.
No pun intended. But I didn't mean for that to be. But so there is no report of a stun gun, allegedly. It's probably not that hard to hide a stun gun. Get rid of one, dispose of one.
Yeah, but they haven't covered it. If it was the Ramseys, they haven't covered anything else up at all.
But see, the Ramseys wouldn't need a stun gun to get JonBenet out of bed to go to the basement, whereas an outside intruder would.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, they most likely, I mean, they wouldn't. Doesn't mean they wouldn't use it. They wouldn't need it.
It would be out of place, I guess. I don't think it would serve any purpose.
It'd be out of place to murder your daughter, Dave.
Also true.
In the Ramseys book, John Ramsey describes going to a spy store due to his concerns about risks to access graphics related to electronic bugging.
As we left, the clerk gave me a videotape catalog to take home. When I returned to Boulder, I threw it in the drawer and completely forgot about the tape. I surmise that as the police went through everything in our house, they found the video catalog, which apparently turned out to have an advertisement for, you got it, stun guns. Not too long after the police reported to the media that they had found a stun gun, quote, instructional video in the Ramsey house. So on the one hand, they were supporting the stun gun theory, but on the other hand, they were not indirectly saying that I had used this weapon on my daughter. Of course, for a period of time, the video created a significant uproar and cast further suspicion on me. Later, we got a copy of the video catalog from the store in Coral Gables and found it was recorded in Spanish. Not only had I never reviewed the tape, if I had, I wouldn't have understood it.
Well, I've never heard of such a thing.
As far as the video catalog?
Yeah.
That's a stretch. Yeah, like that's a stretch, I think.
What?
Just finding the tape and then assuming a stun gun.
Well, and the
back to
police
him.
were putting out stuff to the public, trying to
Of course they were, because they didn't know what the fuck they were
implicate them, right?
doing. Hey, can you help us? Are you a volunteer?
Well, that's the thing, too, is the OJ ended, 2 years before this?
Yeah.
All the tabloids, every ounce of news media in this country, everything realized what that could do for your ratings and your money. And so as soon as this happened, they were like, oh, here we go. OJ's done. Now we got a new one. And I mean, that's what you remember as a kid in the checkout aisle.
I told you guys when we started this series, I know nothing about JonBenet other than being a kid at the grocery store and seeing her face plastered on magazines.
Well, and
I was 10 years old when this happened. I didn't follow it and I didn't look into it when I got older. I'm learning it now.
And in one of those things I was watching, they had an interview with the Globe reporter that was on site that they dispatched to Boulder, and he said the Globe sold an extra, 500,000 copies a week when they ran, headlines based on this. So they told them they wanted a new story about JonBenet every week.
And it wasn't even
a new one every week. So when there's nothing, you find what you can.
That's right.
And you run with it.
Right.
And that's the problem with this. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier with the conspiracy stuff is when there's incompetence, it leaves holes to be filled. And then
this is how they get filled.
Yeah. Every week it was something different with that when you look back at these things. I mean, I was too young to read them, but going through stuff, it's like 1 week it's Patsy did it. Mm-hmm. Then it's John Ramsey did it. Then they started targeting it on Burke, and it's nothing but tabloid bullshit.
Well, and to compound that, whoever took all those photographs of her leaked all those or sold them all. So then there's a new photograph of her every week.
But then you're selling millions and millions of copies.
Yeah.
Like they know,
sure.
they know what they're doing.
I mean,
it just doesn't help an already flawed investigation.
Yeah, I mean, damn well owners of those tabloids and media things are like, this is great for us.
Yep.
Just like Domino's with their fucking pizza with OJ. They were loving every second of that. Record sales.
I forgot about that.
What was the deal with Domino's?
They had record sales during the OJ verdict.
Oh, just because people didn't want to go out.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
But I remember the story of didn't they go through McDonald's when they were running away?
Oh,
Or on the way home,
OJ and
OJ had
Cato.
a Big Mac.
Yeah, him and Cato.
Yeah. Didn't that was that what led to the first debate for us between the Big Mac and the Quarter Pounder?
I believe so.
Maybe.
Oh, we're getting off subject. I know.
Still a delicious sandwich.
It is a delicious sandwich. You know who didn't have an involvement with this? Bat Boy.
He did not. The
Weekly World News might have been the only upstanding tabloid magazine that didn't dive into this.
They were the only one with a fucking spine during this whole thing.
Yeah, they just talked about Bat Boy and his plunders.
I did. When I was looking into this, I fully expected there to be like some Bat Boy did something to JonBenet, but nope, they
have class and dignity and
scruples.
So back to the
all right, we're at the 6-hour mark of this episode.
Back to the stun gun. In theory, authorities could have exhumed JonBenet's body and solved this whole stun gun issue, but that never happened. Boulder DA Alex Hunter considered the stun gun theory, quote, iffy. And according to him, he talked to the police about exhuming JonBenet's body, but they were against it. Judge Carnes' findings regarding the stun gun, quote, defendants John and Patsy Ramsey have presented photographs of JonBenet taken Christmas morning that clearly reveal the absence of any marks on her neck. Yet the autopsy report clearly shows reddish burn-type marks on JonBenet's neck and back. Because it's logical to assume that JonBenet would struggle against an attacker she did not already know, the use of a stun gun helps to explain why no evidence of a struggle was found in any of the bedrooms in the defendant's home. Moreover, defendants have presented the testimony of Dr. Michael Doberson, a forensic pathologist who examined the Boulder coroner's autopsy report and autopsy photos, and who concluded that the injuries to, quote, the right side of the face as well as on the lower left back are patterned injuries most consistent with the application of a stun gun.
As in they got her in the face and in the back?
That's what he's alluding to.
Were there 2 sets of those?
She had multiple
Or they
things.
just got her 2 different times.
What's that I mean? 2 sets of marks.
That's what I mean. Yeah, like one stun gun, and they just got her back, and then maybe her body flopped over, and they put it in her face or something. I don't know.
Evidence of the stun gun theory is primarily put forward by Lou Smith, who was a retired police detective that was called by the DA to come out of retirement and work on the case. Smith resigned from the case 18 months after concluding that the Ramseys had nothing to do with the murder.
Damn.
Yeah, he said that no. John Douglas also says no too, from the FBI criminal profiling.
Right, we discussed him last week.
Yeah. The closest manufacturer.
Are we going to get to hit them next week anymore or no?
John Douglas?
Or
yeah.
just,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll save those questions for next week.
The closest manufacturer that could be linked to a possible stun gun was a company called Air Taser. They gave a lengthy interview on facts about stun guns and are skeptical that any stun gun could have been used without either creating much noise or causing JonBenet to scream in pain.
I don't know about that. I guess you sneak in, you put your hand over her mouth and give her a stun gun and knock her out, right?
I mean, I've never been hit with a stun gun. I don't know.
We should try that on you.
We should. I'm all for that. They're the experts, though. Like, they would give an honest opinion of this? I mean, unless they don't want to besmirch their name, but.
Oh, you know what? In all fairness, or not in all fairness, but when I don't think you guys were here yet. It was before one of the fights we watched over here. I had started drinking super early, and we bought that dog collar for Max that shocks him when he does something bad. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I should be fair to Max, and I should feel what this feels like if I'm going to do it to him. That's only fair. So I turned it up to 100 and put it up against my neck and hit the button. That dude, it fucking hurt, man. It felt like someone punched me in the side of my neck.
Those things work.
And that's just a fucking shot collar. It's not even a taser.
So I never put it on him again, but I'm like, damn, I'm not doing that to him.
You remember CKY when they had the electric fence and they were pissing on it?
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. That really hurt. So I don't know what a stun gun would feel like.
Not good.
No. And Werner Spitz, who we talked about earlier, he did the West Memphis 3 stuff that we talked about. He said that these, in his opinion, these are not stun gun marks on her neck, that he would expect to see some type of an electrical burn, and he doesn't see that in the pictures.
Okay.
So that's his opinion. Because there's a lot of argument on if the marks on JonBenet are bruises or if they're burn marks, and whether or not a stun gun would cause a burn or if it wouldn't cause a burn. The 2016 CBS documentary suggested that the stun gun marks instead were created by the train tracks from Burke's train set in the basement near the wine cellar room.
What's the logic on that?
It's just another media source trying to come up with something to throw at the wall to get ratings and add their own twist on this.
Except that Burke sued them, and I believe they had to settle a defamation suit with him.
He sued the shit out of them for that.
$375 million or something crazy. And they paid something, so.
You can't just say things like that.
That's just like a random thing.
If you watch that, because I think, didn't you say you were thinking about watching that?
Which?
The CBS one, didn't you say it popped up on YouTube?
It popped up at one point, but I wanted to wait till after we did this because I didn't want any spoilers.
If you watch that, and that's all you knew about that case, you would come away from that and be like, Burke did it. 100% Burke did it. Because it doesn't talk about any of this other stuff. It doesn't talk about the fact that she had paintbrush shards inside of her. Mm-hmm. It doesn't talk about anything like that. So you'd be like, fuck yeah, Burke did it. And they covered it up.
That's why they ended up paying.
Exactly. All right.
Finally.
The pineapple. Been alluding to it.
So long story short, if you like pineapple on your pizza, fuck you. End of episode. We'll see you next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, the comments expressed by Mike do not necessarily reflect all staff or all show members.
Actually, they do. In this case, we all wholeheartedly agree.
Cool Down Media does not represent that.
All right, let's talk about this pineapple. This is just odd.
If anything, there's just wrench after wrench thrown. This throws a major wrench.
But I think I'm going to throw a wrench in this whole thing. Just you tell your story.
All right.
I'm going to throw a fucking wrench in this whole story.
All right, let's hear it.
I said it earlier, and you guys told me to shut the fuck up. We'll talk about it on air.
For many years, the general public had heard that pineapple had been found in JonBenet's small intestine. However, according to Lynn Wood's motion and Burke Ramsey's 2016 defamation case against CBS, quote, a Boulder PD analysis after the autopsy determined that JonBenet's small intestine had remnants of cherries, grapes, and pineapple, common fruit cocktail ingredients. So he threw a whole wrench in the pineapple debate.
Interesting.
A bowl of pineapple was found in the breakfast area off from the kitchen. It contained only fresh pineapple and milk, along with a large spoon. No other elements of fruit cocktail were in this bowl. Therefore, the pineapple in this bowl may or may not be connected to the pineapple found in JonBenet's small intestine.
And that bowl was found when?
In the crime scene photos.
But like randomly discovered throughout the day, like that fucking flashlight was? Like at some point someone was like, oh, there's a bowl of pineapple here.
As far as I know.
Like the advocates could have brought it with them.
But that's any of that. Like there's people in and out all goddamn day. Mm-hmm. They could have moved a flashlight. Someone could have had some pineapple. Maybe it was an advocate taking their lunch break and just, whatever. I'm just asking when was it found?
As far as I know, it was found. It's there. Part of the crime scene.
Yeah.
And what's with pineapple in a bowl of milk?
It's very strange.
That would seem like an ordinary breakfast for a young kid, I would think.
A bowl of milk with pineapple in it?
I assumed it was a glass of milk next to it.
It's a bowl. It has milk poured in it and pineapple in the bowl.
Oh.
So you're against pineapple on pizza, but not against it in a bowl of milk?
That's fucking weird.
That's what I'm saying.
He's still thinking
that sounds like that sounds like a cleanup to me. Like someone was trying to clean up a table and maybe they poured like a cup of milk in the bowl to dump it in the garbage disposal or something.
It had a spoon in it, like someone was eating cereal.
Now what do you got?
Well, because you would eat pineapple probably with a fork.
But if it's in milk, if you're eating it like cereal, you'd eat it with a spoon.
But again, that like, was she known to eat something so fucking weird like that? Like, that's odd. And meanwhile, in her system was fruit cocktail. I don't see these two connected. Because if you're finding the cherries and what else was it? The
grapes.
The grapes and the pineapple, which is a fruit cocktail, it seems odd that, I don't know. I don't necessarily think those are connected.
We'll get into it in part 3. Because it seems like something that a kid we all have kids, but it seems like something that a kid would just make on their own. Be like, oh, that sounds good. Pineapple and milk. We'll get into that in part 3. With some theories, but
now you're teasing me because I don't know where the fuck you're going with that.
Pineapple continues to next week.
She wakes up in the middle of the night and decides she wants some pineapple and milk,
or someone else, more likely.
Santa Claus possibly made it for her.
All right,
we'll get into it in part 3.
God, I can't wait to tune in next week.
So Judge Carnes' findings, quote, there's no evidence in the record that indicates when JonBenet ate the pineapple. Defendants state they did not feed JonBenet pineapple upon returning home from the White's party that evening. Mr. White does not recall if the pineapple was served at his dinner party on December 25th, 1996. Based on the condition of the pineapple in her intestines, the experts estimated that JonBenet had eaten it an hour and a half or 2 hours before she died, most likely after the family returned home that night. Both John and Patsy Ramsey stated in their 1998 police interviews they know nothing about the pineapple in the bowl. Patsy does not recall even buying pineapple, and the available evidence suggests the pineapple was not brought by the victim's advocates group.
There you go.
So these motherfuckers can tell you that the pineapple was eaten an hour and a half to 2 hours before she died.
Mm-hmm.
Yet their time of death is what, 12 hours off at least?
The experts that have looked at, that are talking about this, are looking at it in hindsight, talking about the state of the pineapple. They're looking at it in hindsight and saying, yeah, that would be this time frame where she would have had to have eaten it. The coroner who initially did this autopsy was just...
We know he was just trying to get the fuck out of there for a holiday break or something.
Like we were just saying, this is all viewed in hindsight, is going on the time frame of the pineapple. Based on experts looking in hindsight at everything, based on the rigor mortis that was observed, she died likely closer to midnight than 6 a.m. is the window they're given.
Okay. I probably could have told you that. I mean, based on, like, that makes sense. Okay.
And that's the
you
thing
saw
with
a kitchen light on allegedly at about midnight. That was well after everyone went to bed. That would have made sense when she ate some pineapple, probably.
And that the pineapple throws a wrench in the whole narrative, because if you say she was hit with a stun gun in her bed and then brought downstairs,
that doesn't make sense.
At what point did she get the pineapple in her stomach?
Which doesn't make sense.
But that's the stun gun theory, is saying that she was subdued with a stun gun and carried downstairs
to the basement.
Right.
So you either believe the stun gun or you believe the pineapple.
Unless the stun gun is used at some other point, but that makes even less sense, because why would she just be sitting there eating pineapple fine and then hit her with the stun gun? That doesn't make sense.
Unless you do that to get her at the basement.
Yeah, but she was comfortable enough with you to get downstairs and eat the pineapple. Unless she woke up herself, came down, made this pineapple milk thing, and then she was encountered while she was
Which
doing
would be
that.
very convenient for someone who was trying to encounter you, unless you were already in the home, like a family member.
That's what John Douglas believes, is that somebody broke into their house and was waiting.
That's what I'm leaning towards.
Waiting
right
for
now.
her to randomly wake up in the middle of the night.
Just waiting for them to get home and go to sleep, and then they would make their move.
And she just happened to come down.
I mean, sometimes wrong place, wrong time happens.
I mean, that's
all the time.
terrifying to think about for this poor little girl.
Mm-hmm. What are you leaning towards right now?
I don't know. We haven't, and I know we're jumping ahead now to next week. We haven't much touched on the Santa Claus guy.
Yeah.
We only briefly touched on him in part 1. There's probably more to that story that I want to hear about. I do not think it was a coincidence where someone was waiting and she just happened to wake up, come downstairs, and make herself a bowl of pineapple and milk.
Seems strange.
That's odd. So did they already have pre-cut pineapple in their fridge?
Pat says she doesn't even remember buying it. They don't even know where it would come from.
So I don't think that theory holds up. Maybe the theory of the Santa Claus guy came with some pineapple and milk because she told him that's what she wants when she was, giving him a house tour over Christmas or whatever, bonding with him. But then where does the stun gun fit into that?
Right. And if you go with Werner Spitz, he says it's not even a stun gun. No stun gun was used in his opinion.
I feel like there's multiple people involved in this.
That's a whole nother thing then.
And I'm not saying that's a cover-up. I'm not saying it isn't. I just feel like there's more than one person involved in this because there's so many different aspects. There's so many different things.
Where I'm at with it is everything about the murder, nothing points to the Ramseys, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's such a brutal murder. There's no evidence of any past abuse.
And that's what I was going to get to, but I didn't know if we wanted to wait till next week. Like, I was going to ask, what reasoning is there to accuse, like, mom? Was she jealous of her daughter's fame? Did she ever show hostility towards her daughter?
But there's a lot of strange behavior that takes place that we'll get into next week.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Maybe I don't know about some of that.
Yeah,
And just how they react to the police investigation and
that's
things
odd.
like that. It's
But like,
it's not
if you're
normal.
telling me we're gonna blame Burke because he once hit his younger sister with a golf club, like, get the fuck out of here. There's nothing to stand on with that. Kids do that all the time, or it was an accident. That's not enough to make me convinced it was the brother.
Yeah.
If you're gonna tell me there's something else we'll get to next week, well then maybe so.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into all the theories and stuff. Just based on this information, nothing about the actual murder makes me think the Ramseys did it.
I'm with you.
On the surface of it, I think you're right.
But then then you think about the ransom note. You think about the really odd behavior during the time before her body was found.
Now you're convincing me otherwise.
Exactly.
Yeah,
then you start
that's what happens.
Yeah. And then you throw in the pineapple and you're like, wait a second, where the fuck did this even come from?
That's why I think there's more than one person involved. Maybe someone else did it at the behest of the family.
That would be a whole nother thing. Well, let's figure it out next week.
We're going to solve all the answers next week.
That's quite enough for this week.
Yeah. Next week we'll get into the shoe prints because we didn't get a chance to touch on that.
You mean from the 75 people that entered the home?
Right.
Can't wait.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that broken window a little more, and then we'll do all the suspects, all the theories with that.
It's really fascinating. It's terribly sad.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to look at and just try to figure out. But I mean, when you ask for a final answer on it, that's tough. I don't know how you can confidently say or you believe who did this.
Yeah,
based on what I know so far. And I really don't know anything other than what we've discussed thus far.
And I would say I would recommend to anybody that has a really strong theory to, if you haven't, maybe go out and look at all the crime scene and autopsy photos because it might change your mind a little bit.
I will not be looking at those.
On certain theories.
Yeah. Also with discretion because they're
bad, but
we're not going to post those. All right, Dave, what else? You got anything for this one? You got any closing thoughts?
I don't. I suspect next week makes it even more complicated, and not sure we'll be able to even draw conclusions, but we'll see.
Yeah. I did say at the beginning this is going to leave us with more questions and answers, and I suspect we'll complete the whole series with more questions and answers.
It's more of to me, it's more of a mystery than the Dyatlov story.
Yeah, because Dyatlov was the abominable snowman. Killed
Dave
everyone.
solved that one for us.
That was easy.
All right, Ian, you got anything else you want to add to this one? Any last follow-ups, wrap-ups?
Nope, I am good.
We got some shout-outs for some patrons that joined over the last week. We got a decent amount over the past 7 days. Thank you very much to Joshua Bovey, Kaylee, Cute Fruit, Rachel Simmerlink, Tyler Topa, JM, Josh Cowperthwaite, Chris Vick, Jacob Lund, Allison Nicole, Jess Brown, Sam Goldstein, Suzanne Roney, Ariel, John Barfield, Brock Swenson, and Nicholas Martin. Thank you guys very much. We hope you enjoy the bonus content and sign up for the Discord if you haven't already. It's a lot of fun in there. Ian, what shout outs we got?
For iTunes, I have my Yelp nickname, Paula Babe, Lacey Shepard, Lindsay Patterson, Bear326, Somewhere on the Beach, and Shorn92. Thank you guys for the awesome reviews. A lot of good ones recently.
Yeah, a lot of great ones this past week.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
It was a good week for us.
I love reading
all around.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I know you've said it before. Every time we get a new one, we always text them to each other.
Yeah.
Because we have a
Works
three-way
out, yeah.
thread going that we talk in every day.
Even the bad ones we like. We celebrate those as well.
Those are great,
funny.
too.
Yeah. Dave, what do you got on the socials?
From Instagram, Paige JJJJ, Tiffany Macon, and Amy Riggs, a.k.a. Squirt Russell. And from Twitter, Rawaned17. Thanks, guys.
All right. We are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Necronomipod. If you want any of our sweet-ass merch, we are at Amazon.com and search Necronomipod. And if you would like to become a patron, we got 3 bonus episodes a month, plus the private Discord chat room, which has blown up recently and become a ton of fun. You can become a patron at patreon.com/Necronomipod. The $5 tier gets you access to all the bonus content. And if you just want to help out the show and get a shout out on the show, you can sign up for the $1 tier. So that's how you reach out to us.
Yeah, and we're on iHeartRadio now.
We are also on iHeartRadio now, so you can check us out on there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Boom.
So if anybody likes that one better, that platform,
There we are.
yep, head on over. All right, you guys ready for a cool down beer?
Cheers.